Chapter 52, 52 Entering the Ruins. 52 Entering the Ruins. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. Damn it. Son of a bitch. Guillaume Benet's fists continued to hit the air, his rage boiling over at a seemingly invisible creature. His expression was twisted with hatred, and he didn't bother to suppress his emotions. Aurora narrowed her eyes and gestured for white paper to investigate the area. But there was nothing there, just empty air. Lumiere clicked his tongue in annoyance. He's been itching for a fight for a while now. Who's he blaming? Aurora shook her head and casually replied, maybe it's a bishop holding him back, stopping him from rising in rank and gaining extraordinary abilities. Or perhaps someone lured him into secretly worshipping a hidden entity, hoping to receive blessings and grow stronger. She considered that, as the subdeacon of the Eternal Blazing Sun Church, a priest overseeing a rural cathedral, establishing contact with a concealed being wouldn't be easy on his own. When it came to matters of supernatural power, he'd undoubtedly turn to the Dirige Regent's church. The associated occult artifacts and sorcery grimoires would be handed over to the Inquisition for safekeeping or even sealing. They wouldn't be left at Cordo's cathedral. More importantly, it was impressive enough that he could command ancient Faesac. Languages capable of summoning supernatural forces like Hermes and Elvish weren't something a subdeacon like him would encounter. And Aurora, through the eye of mystery prying, had long determined he wasn't someone with innate spiritual prowess who could unintentionally attract malevolence. Thus, without a certain someone's guidance, how could the Padre come into contact with a hidden existence? Aurora considered the possibility that Guillaume Benet had come into possession of a mysterious item without turning it over. Lumiere laughed at the idea. Can't the Padre gripe over that hidden existence? He even dared to make Saint Sith feel aggrieved. It's not impossible for him to blame that hidden existence for enticing him. After mocking Guillaume Benet, Lumiere analyzed seriously, I've been thinking about why the Padre suddenly fell into corruption. There are two suspects. The first is Madame Pualis. She's obviously very powerful. Whether it's Louis Lund, who gave birth in the castle, or the woman suspected to be her in the wilderness surrounded by the undead, it shows that she's not simple. She's involved with abnormal pathways and hidden existences. It's possible that she enticed the Padre. By the way. Lumiere smacked his head. What's wrong? Aurora didn't know what her brother had realized. Lumiere replied solemnly, do you think the Padre has ever given birth to Madame Pualis' child? Aurora was filled with regret for believing her brother was on the brink of an important discovery. She snapped, who told you that Louis Lund's child is Madame Pualis's? What if it's Administrator Beast's or a hidden existence's? No, no. If it was, you would have exploded and turned into a monster when you saw that scene. I just find Madame Pualis to be more dominant in her relationship with the Administrator. Before the loop began, Lumiere felt that the Administrator, Beast, was a little weak. He couldn't keep the butler in check and couldn't keep an eye on his wife. When he appeared with Madame Pualis, he always tried to please the latter. Lumiere originally thought that the Administrator loved his wife very much, but now, he had a new guess. Do you think the Administrator is another fertility tool for Madame Pualis? Perhaps. Aurora held her forehead. The world of mysticism has really broadened my horizons. Many scenes that only exist in novels and imaginations have been realized, in some warped manner. After sighing, she muttered to herself, there seem to be more than 1 or 2 children born in the castle. Where are they? Lumiere thought for a moment and expressed that he had no idea. Infiltrating the castle and conducting a search was out of the question. Not after what happened to Louis Lund and the events in the wilderness. Whatever it took, he wasn't about to cross paths with Madame Pualis again. Aurora felt the same. After their run-in with Madame Pualis, the siblings wanted nothing more than to avoid her at all costs. The Padre grunted in frustration, downing a glass of red wine to take the edge off. He let out a long breath, put down the tall glass, and walked to the bed. It wasn't until the Padre's breathing eased and he seemed to be asleep that Lumiere mocked, look at him, crashing early. What, no late-night rendezvous with his mistress? Oh, he doesn't smoke in private, either. This was inferred from the absence of cigar cases, pipe, and other items in the bedroom. Aurora chuckled and said, he doesn't drink much alcohol either. Everyone says he's a pillar of propriety. She dispatched white paper to scout the bedroom. Finding nothing, it returned as instructed. Aurora turned to Lumiere. You only mentioned one suspect. What about the other? That sneaky owl. Always watching, never acting. Lumiere voiced his guess. It might have led the Padre to the legendary warlock's legacy. Aurora felt that the possibility was quite high. Lumiere then suggested, if that owl pays me another visit, we capture it and interrogate it. You sure you can take down an owl that has lived for centuries? Aurora smirked. I've got you, haven't I? Lumiere flattered his sister. Aurora scoffed. Our chances aren't great, even with both of us. But we can't just sit around and do nothing. We need to find out what's going on before it's too late. As long as we don't interfere with the advent of the 12th night, we'll be fine. Lumiere nodded heavily. Aurora noticed his exhaustion and reached for white paper, who had returned. You've been using your spirit vision too much today. Get some rest. We'll continue tomorrow. She paused for a moment before continuing, in the morning, I'll teach you the basics of the Hermes language. Then, in the afternoon, go see Pierre Barry and have a drink. I'll sneak into his sheep pen and see if I can get any useful information from his 3 sheep. She thought this was the easiest route to investigate. Isn't that too risky? Lumiere asked, already on his feet. Aurora reassured him with a smile. Don't worry, I won't pick a fight. I just need to talk to them in Highlander. It shouldn't raise any alarms. They might know something useful. Lumiere nodded. I'll head to OL Tavern tomorrow afternoon. I'll try to get to know the 3 foreigners. They could be valuable allies. Of course, he had to be careful not to reveal their identities as Beyonders. Okay, Aurora agreed with her brother's plan. Lumiere woke up in his dream bedroom, shrouded in a faint gray fog. As he expected, all the gold, silver, and copper coins, as well as the axe and pitchfork he had collected, were gone. The cycle had reset the dream. I have to gather them again. Lumiere muttered to himself as he left the bedroom and headed to the study. He picked up the lever blue from the table and flipped through it idly. Many of the words had been cut out. Indeed, I was the one to send the request for help. He no longer felt anything about being the one who had sent the request for help. He suspected that Aurora had guided him in sending the request. After all, he had no knowledge of mysticism back then, so he would have relied on a reliable messenger or a postman. Speaking of which, Lumiere realized that the postman who came once a week wasn't in the loop. He figured that the officials probably prevented ordinary people from entering Cordu after receiving the letter. Lumiere looked around for a box to store the letter, but he couldn't remember how many similar items Aurora had in her collection, so he gave up. He got dressed in a way that didn't affect his movements, grabbed his iron black axe, and headed out into the wilderness filled with crevices. He walked towards the ruins surrounding the dark red mountain peak. Lumiere easily dispatched the 2 familiar monsters. He slung the shotgun, cloth bag of lead rounds, and assortment of coins. He moved forward cautiously, deliberately avoiding the path he had taken before, knowing that he was not prepared to face the 3-faced monster. As he made his way through the collapsed buildings and thin gray fog, the constantly alert him took a sniff. He caught a whiff of blood. After some thought, Lumiere sneaked into the shadows and hid in a hidden space on the top of a half-collapsed house, peering through a gap between a few rocks. In the distance, amidst the barren, rubble-filled wasteland, he saw a lump of flesh slowly wriggling towards a building. The flesh was mixed with yellow fat, as if a creature had been crushed by a falling boulder. Lumiere pondered how to deal with such a monster. Should I behead it? But it doesn't even have a head. Suddenly, several dark black, fleshy ropes appeared out of nowhere and bound the blob of flesh tightly. Chapter 53, 53 Mark. 53 Mark. Tentacles. Lumiere was momentarily dumbstruck before recognizing the appendages that ensnared the fleshy mass. He knew Aurora's novels well and had seen all the illustrations. Not only did he recall every melodramatic scene, but he also grasped concepts typically beyond his ken, such as monstrous tentacles. 7 or 8 inky tendrils enveloped the fleshy lump, dragging it towards the crumbled building. A figure emerged from the chaos of strewn rubble. The creature bore a humanoid form, its upper body and feet bare, clad only in black pants. But it lacked a head, sporting only a remnant of a neck. A whirl of razor-sharp teeth filled the cross-section, and its crimson skin gleamed between them. Lumion couldn't help but imagine a human whose head and half their neck had been replaced by some bizarre, gaping orifice. He shook his head, unable to locate a weak point for attack. 7 or 8 fleshy tentacles sprouted from the monster's maw, swiftly hauling the fleshy mass before it and hoisting it up. The creature's neck-mouth blossomed open like a morning glory. Its pearly, needle-like teeth clamped onto the flesh, swallowing it whole like a snake devouring its prey. Lumion scoffed silently. "So, you still need to eat. Thought you guys could survive without food." He then fell into deep thought. Monsters should be common in these ruins. Food must be scarce, so some monsters feed on others, like now. Or maybe, everyone's both hunter and prey. Could I lure an unbeatable monster to others and exploit the chaos? Theoretically, yes. But it's risky. They might just team up to kill me first. As Lumion mulled it over, he noticed the monster's chest, heaving from the effort of digestion, was beginning to swell and contract, as though it was undergoing intense digestion. This attracted Lumion's attention and made him realize that the monster's chest was anything but ordinary. 3 black, seal-like marks adorned its pectorals and base of the neck. Lumion's pupils dilated instinctively, straining for a better look. He'd seen something similar on the Padre. At the end of the Lent celebration, the Padre's body had swelled, tearing his clothes to reveal a black mark. Upon closer inspection, Lumion confirmed that the 3 black seals on the monster matched the Padre's. Composed of cryptic words and symbols, they seemed to connect with an ineffable realm. The difference? The Padre bore at least 11 or 12 marks, whereas the monster had only 3. What's the deal with these marks? Are they bestowed by a hidden power? And the more you have, the greater the boon. Lumion wondered, perplexed. He tried in vain to memorize the markings but couldn't in such a short time. Without pen or paper, he couldn't reproduce them either. The monster finished digesting the fleshy mass. It swung its arm, shaking the fleshy tentacles beside its mouth orifice. The mark beneath its neck glimmered, and a low hum emanated from its chest. The sound swelled, evoking a maelstrom of air tearing through a beehive, whistling in and out of countless tunnels. The trumpet-like orifice gaped wide, amplifying the maddening drone. The cacophony grated on Lumion's nerves, making him itch to pummel the beast. "Your noise is unbearable, you know that." As rage coursed through his veins, Lumion acted on impulse, leaping from the partially collapsed rooftop, shotgun in hand. Bang! Lumion hit the ground hard, his eyes locking onto the monster's gaping maw filled with razor-sharp teeth. He was about to rip the other party a new one for being a stubborn old pig, but serenity gripped him like a vice. He felt helpless, like a bystander who had been thrust onto the stage of a deadly play. The monster's blood-red mouth was trained on him, and it made no sound. "Can I say that I'm sorry, that it's a misunderstanding?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. He suspected that there was something wrong with the noise just now, causing him to lose his mind. He jumped out of his hiding spot and tried to attack. But it was too late for apologies. He had to make a choice, fight or flee. With his experience, Lumion knew that running was not an option. The monster was unscathed and ready, its 8 tentacles raised and poised for attack. Therefore, if he really wanted to escape, he had to fight before finding an opportunity. If he wanted to survive, he had to fight. Without hesitation, Lumion raised the shotgun in his hand, loaded with lead bullets. Bang! The monster was caught off guard by Lumion's speed and decisiveness. It had no idea what the shotgun was and didn't stand a chance as it was pelted with lead bullets. Ah! It howled in pain, its mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth opening instinctively. Its chest was a bloody mess, including the black mark on its right side. However, the black mark seemed to be engraved in his blood and flesh. It was still clearly visible and remained unharmed. Lumion didn't revel in the monster's screams. He quickly repositioned himself and pulled out a new round from his bag. But before he could take aim again, the black mark on the creature's left side glowed, and it vanished into thin air. Just like that, it disappeared in front of Lumion. Had it escaped or turned invisible? He racked his brain for answers from the various novels Aurora had written and the mysticism knowledge she had taught. Lumion searched frantically for any sign of it, but it was gone. This scene and difficulty that he had never faced before made Lumion panic. He wanted to take the opportunity to escape and subconsciously take a few steps back. Lumien's ankles were suddenly yanked, and he lost his balance, flipping over and hanging upside down. Dark, fleshy tentacles appeared out of nowhere, wrapping tightly around Lumien's legs and hoisting him up. The monster was right in front of him, its black mark glowing on its right side. The vortex-shaped mouth filled with white, razor-sharp teeth widened to reveal a blood-red interior. The stench was overwhelming, and Lumien felt dizzy as he hung upside down. He could see the blood-colored skin of the monster's mouth and countless teeth. Thinking quickly, he grabbed one of the tentacles and wrapped it tightly around his arm. In his hanging state, he aimed his shotgun at the monster's mouth and fired. Bang! The monster screamed as flesh and blood spewed from its mouth. It flung Lumien away, and its body turned transparent before vanishing once again. Lumien hit the ground and rolled before getting back up, determined to find his target. Suddenly, he caught a whiff of blood approaching him. Without hesitation, he leaped in the opposite direction. Dark tentacles emerged from the air where he had been standing, but they missed their mark. The monster reappeared 3 to 4 meters away, its vortex-shaped mouth wide open, ready to strike. Lumien loaded his shotgun with lead rounds, but the black mark on the monster's left side glowed, and it vanished again. Invisibility. It's indeed invisibility. Lumien instantly made a judgment. Coupled with his previous encounter, he believed that this invisibility could not hide his scent and would lose its effect once he entered an attack state. After figuring it out, Lumien calmed down and mocked inwardly. How can you be invisible if you can't even hide your scent? Capturing traces was a hunter's forte. Lumien regained his composure and calmly surveyed his surroundings as he circled the area. Soon, he spotted the monster's footprints and caught the scent of blood and its unmistakable stench. Using these clues, he dodged the monster's attacks and fired his shotgun, but it seemed to have no vital points. The creature only grew weaker after being hit multiple times. With the lead rounds running low, Lumien quickly thought of a solution. In just a few seconds, he had an answer. He had scouted the area beforehand and found several natural traps that could be used, including one that would be perfect for this monster. As 2 faint footprints appeared in the distance, Lumien turned and ran, narrowly avoiding the dark, fleshy tentacle that missed its target. He kept running, occasionally looking back to make sure the monster was still chasing him and to dodge any attacks. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The monster's noise only fueled Lumien's anger, making him want to turn around and attack with his axe. But he reminded himself that his goal was to kill the creature, not just vent his frustration. Fortunately, he remembered that his goal in running was to kill that guy. At the moment, he wasn't really running away. Anger and frustration didn't change his plan. It only made him more motivated. Thud thud thud. Finally, he spotted the half-collapsed building and rushed inside, stopping at the edge and pretending to lie in ambush. Soon, he heard the shallow footprints of the monster approaching, along with its stench and blood. Lumien estimated the distance of the tentacle and took a couple of steps back. With a swing of his axe, he struck a stone pillar that was about to collapse, and then kicked it hard, using the reaction force to roll back. The half-collapsed building couldn't withstand the impact and crumbled, a cascade of heavy rocks filling the passage. Boom. The monster, hiding and ready to attack, let out a fierce scream that lasted only a second before it was silenced forever. Chapter 54, 54 Interpretation. 54 Interpretation. Lumien rolled away before springing back to his feet. The sudden scream and its abrupt end brought him a sense of relief. Still, he remained vigilant. Shotgun slung and axe in hand, he cautiously approached the collapsed building. Dust swirled in the air where bricks and wooden beams once stood, lingering on. Outside, Lumien couldn't spot the monster's corpse. It must be buried beneath the rubble. His sense of smell was compromised in the dusty environment. He raised a hand to shield his nose from the irritants. Given the situation, Lumien retreated several steps, maintaining a safe distance as he patiently waited for the dust to settle. As he stood watch, he scrutinized his surroundings, on alert for any subtle signs of movement or scent. Finally, the air cleared, and his vision returned. Lumien neared the wreckage once more, tracking the scent of blood to find the monster crushed beneath heavy stones. With no need to rush, he employed his hunter expertise to methodically remove the rocks, avoiding any secondary collapse. Simultaneously, he kept his guard up against the monster, which might still be alive and awaiting an opportunity to strike. He pulled away another massive stone, revealing the twisted creature, its head neck a mangled vortex. Its maw faced the sky, crushed into a gory mess. Its chest was flattened, and its sharp mouth impaled on a jagged stone pillar. Several dark, fleshy tentacles had snapped. If not for its distinct features, Lumion wouldn't have recognized the semi-solid mass as his target. The trap had worked better than he'd anticipated. After confirming the monster's demise, Lumion noticed the 3 black markings on its chest, still clearly visible despite the carnage. It's so odd. This can't be common, even in mysticism, right? Despite going through his sister's crash course, Lumion still had much to learn. He relied on his intuition for judgment. He had planned to use his knife to remove the skin with the black mark, but the creature's chest was too mangled to salvage anything. After pondering for a moment, he tore a piece of cloth from his linen shirt, using it as makeshift paper. Next, he wrapped another strip around his finger, staining it with the monster's blood. Whether it sufficiently isolated potential contamination or poison, he couldn't be sure. If anything happened, he'd have to leave the dream quickly, minimizing any damage to reality. He should recover within hours or half a day. Using the blood as ink, Lumion copied the 3 black marks. As he drew, dizziness struck, and a swelling pain pulsed in his forehead. Lumion surmised from his sister's teachings that his spirituality was nearly depleted. Just copying these marks almost drained me entirely. He was astonished by the bizarre markings and the meager spiritual capacity of a hunter, which he suspected was only slightly greater than a spiritually gifted person. After resting briefly, Lumion continued copying. It took 3 intermittent attempts before completion, his head throbbing. In his current state, further exploration was impossible. He pocketed the cloth, hoisted his axe, and headed back across the wilderness towards home. Emerging from the ruins, he felt a sense of accomplishment, as if he had absorbed a significant portion of the hunter potion. Looks like it was a successful hunt, Lumion mused. His unsorted experiences bubbled to the surface. Staying calm is crucial. When faced with unexpected prey and no time to prepare, calmness is even more vital. Always observe your surroundings and exploit opportunities. With his thoughts racing, Lumion made his way home, ascended to the 2nd floor, and entered the bedroom. He forced himself to memorize the marks for a while before collapsing on the bed in exhaustion. The next morning, when Lumion woke up, his temples were still throbbing a bit. That was a sign his spirituality had been drained in the dream ruins. He shook his head and left the room to splash his face in the bathroom. When he went downstairs, he realized his sister had already made breakfast, toast with jam, sliced sausages, and strong black coffee. So early? Lumion blurted out in surprise. His sister rarely woke up early. Aurora replied grumpily, realizing we're stuck in a time loop, and the people around us are getting weirder and creepier. How can you sleep well? Not me. I've got no choice. Lumion comforted his sister. At least you can really sleep. I've got stuff to do in my dreams. That's true. Aurora picked up the coffee laced with half a packet of sugar and took a swig. After her brother sat down and wolfed most of the toast and sausage, she asked, "What did you get out of exploring the dream ruins?" Lumion recounted his run-in with the monster and said, "Aurora, grande sir, help me figure out what those 3 black marks mean." At the end of Lent, the priest had something similar on him, but even more. Aurora nodded and took out a fountain pen and a note from a hidden pocket in her beige dress. Lumion began sketching, but he couldn't accurately replicate the black marks. Soon, he handed the note to his sister and introduced, "I only memorized it a few times. I can't be sure if some of it's right or wrong, but some of it must be. Here, and here are spot on." Just replicating part of the mark had drained a lot of his spirituality. Aurora placed the note on the dining table in front of her and focused on it for a while. "These words aren't any I know. The symbols that go with them are more warped than those commonly seen in mysticism too." Lumion was a little disappointed when Aurora added, "Judging by the influence of transcendent words and symbols on the surroundings and the leverage the marks have on natural power, I suspect this is the outward manifestation of a special contract." As she spoke, she tapped the note with her index finger. "Contract?" Lumion asked. Aurora nodded. "Paired with your battle with that monster, each black mark should represent a special contract. The effect of this contract is likely helping it gain a superpower from certain spirit world creatures, creatures from other dimensions, or extraterrestrial creatures. So, the black mark on its left chest emits light and grants invisibility. The one below its neck corresponds to a voice that makes people frustrated, resentful, and lose their minds. The one on its right chest didn't show anything. I suspect it has something to do with its mouth orifice, tentacles, or digestion. No wonder, Lumion immediately understood some of the details of the previous battle. He then laughed and said, "The Padre signed more than 10 contracts with different creatures. What does this mean? Everyone can be his daddy." "What a strange way to put it," Aurora muttered. "From the looks of it, the priest who fought you at the end of Lent didn't even show a tenth of his strength. He probably only used one ability he got through the contract. His body and mind went out of whack for no reason, and he was at your mercy." Lumion didn't get the previous 2 cycles, but he clearly knew it was luck back then. He eagerly asked, "Can I copy the contract obtained from the monster and contact the corresponding creature?" He was very envious of that invisibility ability. A contract is a contract, and a ritual is a ritual. Do you know how to conduct a ritual? Aurora doused his enthusiasm. Even if you master the ritual, do you know what the price of such a special contract is? The Padre might have only completed it with the blessing of a hidden existence. Aurora paused for a second and muttered to herself, "Why does the monster in your dream ruin have such a black mark? Did it also receive the blessing of that entity?" As she spoke, Aurora cast her gaze at Lumion's left chest. Could it be related to the black thorn symbol sealing your heart? The Padre had one too. Maybe the thorn symbol represents a hidden existence that created the dream ruin. The key to breaking the cycle might be hidden there. Or, maybe reality can only solve the problem by doing something simultaneously with the dream ruin. It's possible, Lumion thought, realizing that this could explain why the monster had a black mark and why the mysterious lady wanted him to explore the dream ruins. He let out an emotional sigh. "Aurora, grande sœur, your imagination is indeed much richer than mine." "That's what an author should be like," Aurora replied with a smile. After breakfast, Aurora brought Lumion to the study to teach him Hermes. They ended the lesson around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, only stopping to grab a quick bite to eat. "All right, you can go out and drink with Pierre Barry now," Aurora said, realizing it was time and that no one would suspect them. Lumion acknowledged her instruction briefly and expressed his concern. "You must be careful." Aurora was going to take the risk of coming into contact with the 3 sheep to gather information. Lumion arrived at the dilapidated 2-story house where Shepherd Pierre Barry lived and looked around before asking the old woman, "Where's Pierre?" The old woman, Pierre Barry's mother, Marty, appeared to be in her early 50s but had many wrinkles due to overexertion from work. Her skin was freckled, and her black hair had turned gray. She looked almost as old as Naroka. "He went to the cathedral," Marty replied. Lumion was alarmed. He went to the cathedral again. Chapter 55, 55 Persona. 55 Persona. If Lumion remembered correctly, Pierre Barry would undoubtedly visit the cathedral to offer his prayers past noon of March 30th. He and Raimund had crossed paths with him during the previous cycle, and Lumion had also encountered him at the village square at a similar hour. However, it was already 3 or 4 in the afternoon. "When did he leave?" Lumion inquired. Marty pondered for a moment and responded, "Around the time taken to cover a mile." In the countryside, except for a handful of people, hardly anyone owned a timepiece. Time was generally conveyed through specific activities and indications such as grape harvesting season, the duration of a mile's walk, and so forth. Obviously, if the time frame was brief enough for people to perceive it more distinctly, a few minutes, and 15 minutes, would be employed in verbal expressions. A mile. That isn't too far. Lumion speculated that Pierre Barry had already gone to the cathedral around noon and had yet to return. 1 mile in quarter was equivalent to 1 kilometer in the Intision metric system. After bidding farewell to Pierre's mother, Marty, Lumion departed from the Barry residence and proceeded towards the village square. He was unsure whether Pierre Barry had visited the cathedral at noon and returned again in the afternoon, or if something had cropped up, delaying his return. If it was the former scenario, Lumion could sense something brewing. It was highly unusual for Pierre Barry to frequently visit the cathedral to meet the Padre. Something dreadful was certainly afoot. If it was the latter scenario, it would be a massive problem. Before Lumiere, who retained his memories, and Aurora, who already knew the cycle, made an attempt, the history should remain unaltered. If there were any deviations, it could indicate that the siblings had not completely comprehended the pattern of the cycles, or that there were others who could retain their memories. With this in mind, Lumiere heaved a sigh and raised his hand to strike his face. He was so startled that he forgot to inquire if Pierre had visited the cathedral at noon. That was crucial. It was far too suspicious to turn back and ask now. Lumiere could only obtain some information from Pierre when they drank together later. He quickly suppressed his frustration and strode towards the square. Upon entering the Cathedral of the Eternal Blazing Sun, he saw the Padre, Guillaume Benet, standing in front of the altar with several sunflowers. He was conversing with a few individuals seated in the front pew. As soon as Lumiere entered, Guillaume Benet ceased speaking and glanced over. Some plot. Lumiere smiled as he approached the altar, observing the individuals listening to the Padre's sermon. He spotted Shepherd Pierre Barry, the thug Pons Benet, and a few of his henchmen. He also saw the Padre's mistress, Madonna Benet, and Sybil Barry. He was surprised to see a man here but also found it reasonable, Arnaud André, Naroka's youngest son, a farmer in his 40s. "Hello, Pierre," Lumiere greeted him with a smile, but he halted midway. The second half of his sentence was meant to be, "Aren't you buying drinks? Why are you here?" However, he suddenly became vigilant and remembered that this arrangement had yet to occur in this cycle. This was something that had only transpired in the previous cycle. This was the first time Lumiere had encountered Shepherd Pierre Barry in this cycle. As Cordo's prankster king, Lumiere's reflexes were lightning quick. He promptly altered his posture and extended his arms towards the altar. Praise the sun. Keeping up the facade, his thoughts raced as he conjured up a fresh alibi. After paying homage to the sun and receiving a response from the priest, Lumiere pivoted and addressed Pierre Barry, who sat at the front row's edge, gazing at him with bewilderment. "I heard you had returned to the village, so I went to your dwelling to seek you out. Lo and behold, you're here in the cathedral." He didn't specify who had informed him, knowing that Pierre Barry would have been spotted en route to the cathedral. With no witnesses to his lie, Lumiere had a fallback option, Ava's father, the cobbler Guillaume Lizier. "Why are you looking for me?" Pierre Barry rose to his feet, clad in a dark brown robe, his blue eyes brimming with gentle amusement and perplexity. Lumiere had already prepared a plausible excuse. He grinned and responded, "I yearn to hear your tales while tending to your flock. Diverse countries, varied hamlets, and sundry locales. They must be enthralling." In the past, he had frequently conversed with newly returned shepherds to enrich his knowledge. Without waiting for Pierre Barry's reply, Lumiere shifted his gaze from his disheveled and greasy black hair to his brand-new leather shoes. "Did you make it rich?" "My current employer was more generous this time and bestowed upon me quite a few things," Pierre Barry replied with a smile. "I'll treat you to a drink later." "All right." This was precisely what Lumiere had been angling for. He even inquired, "When will you be heading there?" This displayed the panache of a regular patron of OL Tavern. He was unashamed when it came to cadging a glass of wine. Pierre Barry glanced at Guillaume Benet, the priest, and received a corresponding hint. "How about after dinner?" he suggested. "Agreed," Lumiere assented readily. Thereafter, under the scrutiny of the shepherd, priest, Pons Benet, and company, he seated himself in the second pew closest to him. Pierre Barry was momentarily taken aback. "Aren't you going back?" Lumiere beamed. "I haven't prayed in ages. I'll seize this opportunity to pray, lest the deity thinks I'm not devout enough. Carry on, carry on. Pretend I'm not here." Saying so, he closed his eyes, lowered his head slightly, and crossed his arms over his chest. Pierre Barry, Guillaume Benet, Pons Benet, and the rest exchanged glances, at a loss for words. After patiently waiting for an extended period and observing Lumiere still engrossed in prayer, the priest turned to Pierre Barry, gesturing for him to inquire. Pierre Barry approached Lumiere's side and patted his shoulder. "How long do you intend to pray?" Lumiere opened his eyes and stated gravely, "I plan to pray until dinner time. Since there's nothing else to do, I can make a confession later." Guillaume Benet's forehead twitched upon hearing this. Gazing at Madonna, Sybil, Pons, Arnaud, and the others waiting for him, he exhaled slowly. He signaled to Pierre Barry and gestured towards the door. Pierre Barry comprehended the priest's unspoken message and hastily informed Lumière, "I'm done praying. Shall we proceed to Ol Tavern now?" "Absolutely." Lumière stood up, grinning from ear to ear. There was nary a hint of solemnity or piety in his demeanor. Previously, he had discerned that his arrival had impeded the padre and his accomplices' machinations. In a mischievous attempt to play a prank, he feigned interest and lingered until Pierre Barry was required to depart prematurely. He surmised that the padre saw through his act, but what use was being the prankster king of Cordoue if he didn't create a bit of mischief in such circumstances? He had to maintain his persona to avoid arousing suspicion. Lumière lamented his sister's probable departure to Barry's abode to confer with the three sheep. Had she been present, he could have dispatched white paper to the cathedral to clandestinely overhear the padre's scheme and glean valuable intelligence. "Perhaps I can undertake this in the next cycle, but would Pierre detect our surveillance?" "Pierre is no simpleton. He is certainly more capable than an ordinary person like the padre." Lumière's thoughts raced as he trailed Pierre out of the cathedral and towards the Ol Tavern. In the sheep pen behind the Barry household, Aurora, donned in a white gown, circumnavigated the woods and vaulted the wooden fence. As an alluring woman seldom seen in the village, she had to choose this relatively secluded path. Otherwise, she would be subjected to small talk or worse, suspicion. "When will I learn the spells of invisibility and shadow concealment?" Aurora ruminated wistfully as she advanced towards the three sheep that had huddled beside a haystack. Speaking in Highlander, she said, "Do not fret. I am the adversary of Shepherd Pierre Barry." The eyes of the three sheep, whose coats were besmirched with filth, underwent a rapid transformation. Their initial vigilance and apprehension gave way to hope and perplexity. Despite their initial reservations, they did not retreat and permitted Aurora to approach. Aurora continued, "I discovered your peculiarities through certain means. You were once human, were you not?" The eyes of the three sheep were suddenly imbued with shock, elation, hope, and skepticism. They instinctually bleated. Aurora surveyed them. "You cannot speak, but you can write, can you not?" One of the sheep was stupefied for a moment before hastily inscribing on the ground. It scribbled a simple Highlander word, "Yes." The sheep was confirming that they were once human. What transpired? Why were you transformed into sheep? Aurora pondered briefly before adding, "Write the beginning, middle, and end separately to save time." The three sheep divided the task and inscribed different portions of the narrative on the surface of the soil using their hooves. Before long, they had each completed a sentence. "We were caught." A ritual was conducted. Swaddled in sheepskin and metamorphosed into sheep. A ritualistic sorcery that can convert a human into a sheep using sheepskin. That is decidedly easier than transfiguring a person into a sheep. The only question is, which deity was the ritual invoking? Aurora queried as her mind raced, "Did Pierre Barry capture you? Is he alone?" She wished to ascertain Pierre Barry's current strength. "Yes." One of the sheep responded. The other sheep added more, "He has an accomplice." They were both exceedingly formidable. Pierre Barry was already immensely powerful before his return to the village. Aurora suddenly detected something amiss. Why did Pierre Barry appear to be under the sway of Guillaume Benet, the padre? Guillaume Benet was still an ordinary person. Chapter 56, 56 Intuition. 56 Intuition. The more Aurora ruminated on the matter, the more her suspicions intensified. How could the powerless Guillaume Benet possibly subdue the mighty Pierre Barry, who possessed no less than supernatural abilities? If the padre was indeed favored by the clandestine force to the extent that his clique considered him their leader, he should have been bestowed with a boon long ago and elevated above the common masses. Should he decline the boon, he would inevitably face ostracism. In these circumstances, his standing, authority, and machinations paled in comparison to his might or the gulf that separated him from divinity. Aurora lacked the luxury of time to ponder this and could only conceive of two plausible explanations. Either Guillaume Benet was not the true leader of the small group and was merely exploiting his status to orchestrate and conceal the anomaly from the eternal blazing sun church in Darige. Or, he was not rejecting the boon but merely biding his time to attain greater power. Neither explanation boded well. Aurora directed her gaze at the 3 sheep and inquired, "Who was the man that accompanied Pierre Barry in his assault on you?" The 3 sheep scribbled down their responses. "Nior Best. A shepherd named Nior. He goes by the name Nior. Nior Best too has achieved extraordinary power." Aurora was acquainted with the individual in question. Nior was a fellow shepherd from Corda who frequently grazed his flock alongside Pierre Barry. But he had seemingly not returned early this time. "Where is Nior?" "I did not spot him in the village," Aurora queried. The 3 sheep moved a few steps away and found a new patch of unmarked soil on which to write. "He's dead. I killed him. We took him out, but we were apprehended." Had he fallen victim to a counterattack? Aurora nodded pensively. "Are all of you Beyonders?" The 3 sheep ceased writing Highlander with their hooves and nodded in assent. Aurora acknowledged them tersely as she raced to process the implications. "Pierre Barry and Nior Best are hunting Beyonders. What is their motive? And one of them is now dead. Either Nior's abilities paled in comparison to Pierre's, or they had acquired their powers through the boon and were far from proficient in wielding them." It was certain that the Beyonder battles would encounter complications. Aurora glanced at the 3 sheep once more and asked, "Do you know why Pierre captured you?" The 3 sheep resumed writing. "I have heard him speak of God and devotion. It may be for a blood sacrifice. I suspect he wants to offer us as a sacrifice to an evil god. Indeed, Beyonders possess remarkably high spirituality and unique characteristics. They are far superior to ordinary mortals as sacrificial offerings, and they can appease malevolent gods more effectively. Pierre Barry and Nior Best were using grazing sheep as a ruse to abduct Beyonders from other countries to offer them up as sacrifices. It is a scheme that can easily evade the local authorities' notice." Aurora nodded imperceptibly. She spoke solemnly. "Did Pierre mention the honorific name of that god? Or rather, who were they praying to during the ritual that transformed you into sheep?" The 3 sheep were taken aback, as if they were awash in recollections. Suddenly, they lowered their heads and extended their hooves towards the soil before them. For some inexplicable reason, Aurora felt that the temperature had plummeted, and the sun had been obscured by dark clouds, as a chilly mountain breeze swept past. The 3 sheep began writing. Aurora's spiritual intuition sounded a powerful alarm, prompting her to bellow, "Hold on." The 3 sheep lifted their heads and looked at her. At some point, blood-red tears had welled up in their eyes, and their fur was stained and ghastly. In the next moment, they resumed writing. Aurora whirled around and dashed towards the fence. As she exited the pen and looked back, the 3 sheep were bathed in the sunlight. If not for the blood stains on their faces, everything seemed entirely ordinary. Thump, thump. Aurora's heart continued pounding. Panting heavily, she breathed a sigh of relief. "If I had not learned to seal my sight and glimpse things I should not have seen, I would not have reacted in time." She produced a vial of iron black powder and scattered it over the sheep pen. The words etched in the soil vanished as though by an unseen hand. As for the stains on the sheep's faces, Aurora found it challenging to expunge them using spells, so she refrained from approaching them and merely washed them away with water. She feared that the 3 sheep were different from before and harbored latent dangers. In OL Tavern, Lumiere sat at the bar, sipping on light green absinthe, his right elbow propped up casually as he surveyed the room. He searched for the mysterious lady, but she was nowhere to be seen, nor were Ryan, Leah, and Valentine. Lumiere knew not when the former would arrive, and as for the latter 3, he assumed they were wandering the village, engaging in idle chatter. Pierre Barry, who had just finished his glass of absinthe, picked up a new pale green liquid and babbled, "I had a chance to get married." "Is that so?" Lumiere scoffed, "Who would fancy a shepherd?" Pierre sighed and replied, "Most of the pastures we graze in are owned by manor owners or nearby villages. If we want to graze, we have to pay a ranch tax or marry a village girl and settle down there." Lumiere smiled. "That's a good thing for a shepherd." Pierre took a sip of absinthe and glanced sideways at Lumiere. "That girl must fancy you and not ask for dowry. At one time, a lady thought I was not bad and didn't mind that I was a pauper and a shepherd. She was willing to marry me." "Was she very foolish?" "Yes." Lumiere nodded honestly. Pierre took another sip of absinthe and was silent for a long time before saying, "Later, she died. She worked in a factory in the suburbs and fell ill due to exhaustion. I went to several cathedrals, got the priests to pray for her, and found doctors to treat her, but it was useless. After that day, I realized something. Lumion asked, taking a swig of absinthe. What was it? Resentment flashed across Pierre's face as he replied, those who possess flesh and excrete from their posterior cannot absolve us of our predicament. Lumion asked, so, those without flesh and those who do not excrete from their posterior are acceptable? Pierre chuckled. Those are saints and angels, but will they deign to look at us? Lumion sked. Then why did you go to the cathedral to seek the Padre's counsel? Not only does he possess flesh and excrete from his posterior, but he also indulges in the carnal pleasures with women. Pierre turned his head towards Lumion and cast a sidelong glance. You fail to comprehend. He possesses a certain intellectuality that can redeem our souls. Intellectuality. Lumion struggled to grasp the term. Pierre took another sip of his light green absinthe, seemingly oblivious to the question. Lumion dared not press the matter further, and instead inquired, I heard that you visited the cathedral at noon. Why did you return in the afternoon? Pierre's warm smile illuminated his face as he replied, in the afternoon, one can converse with like-minded individuals. He did not deny that he had visited the cathedral at noon. Lumion breathed a sigh of relief. Knowing that for the time being, no one else would retain their memories and disrupt the flow of history. He suspected that Pierre Barry had visited the cathedral at noon to confer with the Padre in advance of their small group discussion scheduled for the afternoon. After their libations and with the sun setting on the horizon, Lumion and Pierre Barry bid each other farewell and returned to their respective abodes. Pons Benet, the Padre's younger brother, abruptly emerged with a few thugs and obstructed Lumion's way upon him reaching a secluded path. The brawny, raven-haired, azure-eyed Pons Benet stared at Lumion and smirked maliciously. You were good at pranks in ZE afternoon, no. Wasting our time in ZE Cathedral. If ZE Padre wasn't there, I would have beaten you up, eh? Bastard, come and eat Daddy Pons's XX. Initially taken aback by this imbecile's foolishness, Lumion was elated. His and Aurora's judgment was correct. In the previous cycle, Pons Benet likely hadn't acquired supernatural abilities before Naroka's funeral and thus had no sense of danger. He had actually dared to obstruct a Beyonder's path. Without hesitation, Lumion turned and bolted, with Pons and his thugs in hot pursuit. However, as soon as they exited the trail between two buildings, they lost sight of their quarry. Pons Benet scanned his surroundings and ordered his subordinates, spread out and search. He deemed it impossible for Lumion to have fled so swiftly and believed he was hiding nearby. The thugs dispersed and combed the area for any potential hideouts, leaving Pons Benet alone at the trail's entrance. Lumion, who had ascended to the second floor of the adjacent building, chuckled and leapt towards Pons. Bang! Pons was sent hurtling to the ground with tremendous force, gasping for breath and momentarily incapacitated. Had Lumion not restrained himself and struck him directly, he might have broken several bones. Lumion stood up, clasped Pons's forearms, and smiled at him, saying, Come, let us become better acquainted. Before Pons could offer any resistance, Lumion pulled him into his embrace and kneed him. Pons's eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets, and his face twisted in agony. Thud. Lumion released him, allowing the men to crumple to the ground like a shrimp. He then turned and darted down the trail, vanishing from sight before the thugs returned. In the kitchen, which also doubled as a part-time living and dining area, Lumion updated his sister on his situation. Pierre Barry visited the cathedral in the afternoon. It's confirmed that Pons Benet still lacks any superpowers. Aurora nodded slightly and recounted her own experience, particularly the inexplicable danger at the end. Lumion pondered for a moment before remarking, that enigmatic lady claimed that certain entities might corrupt you merely by acknowledging their existence. Chapter 57, 57 Arrangements. 57 Arrangements. Aurora recollected the situation and surmised that her brother's account was accurate. She sighed, overcome with emotion and remarked, to think that such dreadful corruption can be brought about by the concealed entity worshipped by Pierre Barry and his accomplices. Even the evil deities mentioned in ancient manuscripts fail to elicit such a reaction. Lumion showed no signs of surprise and said, Otherwise, why are we trapped in a time loop? The more Aurora contemplated, the more perplexed she became. She muttered, Is it possible that we have to confront the concealed entity on the 12th night and defeat it to end the cycle? This would entail gathering ingredients, digesting the potion, and undergoing repeated cycles to become a deity. Lu Mian interrupted her train of thought as he realized that his sister was becoming increasingly irrational. Stop. It cannot be this extreme. Aurora acknowledged his remark tersely and nodded slightly. You are right. We have, at most, one more cycle. It is impossible for us to become deities within 20 days. She then shrugged and added, there is no hope. Let us wait for death. Even Lu Mian, who had an inventive mind, struggled to keep up with his sister's thoughts. Aurora exhaled and looked at her brother. All right, I am done venting. Continue. Huh. Lu Mian appeared puzzled and took a few seconds to understand what his sister meant by continuing. By the look of things, the 3 transformed sheep are to be offered as sacrifices and brought back to Cordu. It is no surprise that they did not wait until early May. The 12th night is, in fact, the day of a grand-scale sacrifice to the concealed entity. Aurora's eyes scanned the surroundings, and she said, that was my assumption, but why did the Padre and his accomplices receive varying degrees of blessings before Lent? According to my understanding, it should have been an exchange through sacrifice. Drawing on his malicious perspective, Lu Mian made a bold conjecture based on the previous cycle's events. A small sacrifice and a grand ritual. At the end of the Lent celebration, the Padre, who had obtained extraordinary powers, no longer concealed his abnormality. It is evident that he was planning something significant. After pondering for a moment, Aurora said, the Lent celebration could be a part of the grand ritual. Before the grand ritual, the Padre made up his mind and offered his soul to the evil deity. With a certain amount of offerings, he obtained a plethora of blessings, completely revealing his true colors. By the looks of it, everyone in Cordu will be implicated once the Lent celebration commences. No one can escape. The siblings exchanged glances and believed that their assumption was close to the truth. However, if the abnormality erupted entirely from the Lent celebration until the 12th night, how could they patiently wait until the final ritual to find the key to the cycle? There was a high probability that everyone in the village, apart from those who died as sacrifices, would be corrupted. I am only a sequence 7, Aurora covered her face and said, and you are only a sequence 9. They were facing such a dire situation. Based on Lu Mian's account of the battle at the end of the Lent celebration and his recent experience hunting black-marked monsters, she knew that she was no match for the Padre who had received a boon. She felt that she had to prepare in advance before she could confront Pierre Barry. Lu Mian had fortunately defeated the mutated Padre in a 1-on-2 battle. Yet, preventing the Padre and his accomplices from obtaining supernatural powers in advance could avert the 12th night. The cycle would most likely restart in advance. Hell difficulty. Hell difficulty. Aurora slammed the dining table with a mournful expression. Without waiting for Lu Mian's response, she raised her hands and tousled her blonde locks, as if releasing pent-up emotions. After a series of gestures, Aurora composed herself and calmly addressed Lu Mian, seek out the trio of foreigners tomorrow morning. You may disclose the abnormality in the village to them. Concealing our status as Beyonders is unnecessary. It's very dangerous, Lu Mian instinctively replied. Was it not natural for wild Beyonders to be considered culpable when they encountered officials? Aurora let out a slow exhale and stated, in this predicament, we can't care less. Other than the enigmatic lady, the trio are likely the most reliable individuals in the village. Moreover, each of them possesses strength that is on par with mine or even surpasses it. We are all in the same boat. Do not underestimate one another. Whether one is a wild Beyonder or an official, we must band together. As for the possibility of being hunted down by officials in the future, we shall cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we must focus on escaping this loop. Lu Mian had heard his sister use the phrase, all in the same boat, before. He knew it implied that everyone was in a similar predicament and facing the same problem. If something were to happen, no one could escape. They had to stand together. Very well, I will seek them out tomorrow, he assented. Aurora continued, I now suspect that someone else is behind the Padre and Pierre. He is the root of the corruption. Madame Pualis. Lu Mian guessed. Not only is she powerful, but she is also the Padre's mistress. She can control him in secret and use him to influence the others in the village. But she has no apparent connection to Pierre. Aurora gazed at her brother, frowning in contemplation. From the encounter with the three sheep, Pierre and Nur should have gained supernatural powers when they grazed the plains last October. At the very least, they should have acquired the corresponding knowledge. This is because they did not return midway, so it is impossible to obtain it elsewhere. This means that the abnormality in the village can be traced back to July and August of last year. Did you notice any anomalies? Lumian shook his head slowly. No. He had initially thought that he was thoroughly acquainted with Cordu, but now, he realized that the undercurrents had been present for over half a year. This realization filled him with dread and made him feel like a stranger in his own home. What is the problem? Lumian felt as though he was shrouded in layers of fog. He could never discern the truth of the matter. Aurora continued, it could also be that owl. Perhaps the legendary warlock who died is not truly deceased. He may still be hiding somewhere in the village, or perhaps someone who we frequently encounter. He may have already discovered that I am a warlock, and deliberately suppressed the legend from me. There are no such restrictions for ordinary individuals like you. Aurora instructed in a low voice, notify me immediately the next time the owl pays a visit. I will get white paper to track it and determine its whereabouts. Lumian tersely acknowledged his sister's request, indicating that he too was waiting for the owl to appear. This time, I will pluck all your feathers. He cursed inwardly. Aurora pondered for a moment before issuing a third directive. Tomorrow afternoon, I shall extend an invitation to Madame Pualis. The administrator remains at his post, leaving the butler and the servants as the only occupants of the castle. You may clandestinely enter and scour for any clues. If you are successful in persuading the three foreigners in the morning to come, we can get their aid in this operation. She dared not let white paper venture to Madame Pualis's place whilst she was present. Nevertheless, she could not afford to be distracted whilst in Madame Pualis's company, thus she had to rely on her brother. Lumian nodded before advancing the suggestion. I would advise against being alone with Madame Pualis. I fear she may seize the opportunity to deal with you. Shall we invite Naisley and the others to an afternoon tea gathering? The more individuals present, the safer it would be. Indeed. Aurora deemed it a superior option. She then remarked in a tone that was equal parts apprehensive and teasing, you must exercise caution after infiltrating the castle. I do not wish to end up an ant. Lumian dared not retort, but gave her a glance that conveyed, I am more concerned about your safety, for Madame Pualis will be with you. During supper, Aurora set white paper free to monitor the sheep pen. She discovered that the three sheep had licked the blood off their faces, preventing Shepherd Pierre Barry from detecting any anomaly. Following that, Lumian resumed his education on mysticism until he fell asleep. He acquired mastery over many Hermes words, including me, name, summon, need, light, and sun. Light served as an incantation to activate the integrity brooch. There were 3 paragraphs in total. Lumian awoke in the room shrouded in a faint gray mist. He strode to the window and scrutinized the dark red peak and the dilapidated edifices that surrounded it once more. I wonder what secrets lie here, Lumian muttered. As he gazed, a thought suddenly struck him. The ruins contained too many hazardous zones that he either could not or dared not approach. For instance, the lair of the three-faced monster. However, if he could summon a spirit world creature akin to white paper and forge a pact with it, allowing it to infiltrate and observe, he ought to be able to gather more intelligence. His vision, sense of smell, and hearing were all heightened by his beyonder characteristics. In theory, they constituted a kind of supernatural power that could be conveyed upon white paper. As he ruminated, Lumian muttered to himself, the problem now is whether I can summon a spirit world creature in the dream ruins. If I cannot, can I utilize our connection to bring it into the dream after summoning and forging the pact in reality? What implications will the addition of a contracted creature have on the cycle? Can the corresponding spirit world be added to the mix? If not, once the summoning duration elapses, the contracted creature will return and the cycle will recommence. The more Lumian thought about it, the more his head throbbed. He felt a profound reverence for mysticism. He could only hope to swiftly master a few languages that would enable him to complete a summoning ritual. Without further ado, he seized his shotgun, the meager quantity of lead bullets that remained, and the sharp axe. He departed his home, traversed the wilderness, and re-entered the ruins. Chapter 58, 58 Cherishing Talent. 58 Cherishing Talent. After 2 nights of reconnaissance, Lumian discovered that the monsters inhabiting the outskirts of the dream ruins were fewer in number than he'd initially believed. Having dispatched the skinless creature, the shotgun-wielding monstrosity, and the monster with the black mark, Lumian found little else in his search of the area. All he uncovered were a few twitching chunks of flesh. Their sole purpose seemed to be as sustenance. Yet Lumian had long since realized that he had no need for food within the dream. Each time he entered, he felt invigorated and hunger-free. His energy would wane only after extended bouts of exploration or combat, replaced by a sensation akin to hunger. But it was a mild feeling that didn't necessitate additional nourishment. Once the hunger became unbearable, Lumian's spiritual reserves and stamina would be all but depleted. Physically and mentally drained, he'd be forced to exit the dream. After consuming a meal and recovering in the real world, he would return to the dreamscape, his vigor restored and hunger vanquished. As he delved deeper, Lumian surveyed his surroundings for any signs of collapsed structures. He discovered a smattering of coins, but their combined value amounted to little more than a louis d'or. He found merely a few livres bleu inscribed with words. Left with no alternative, Lumian decided to venture further into the ruins. He cautiously navigated through the faint gray fog and oppressive darkness, weaving between the ruins' standing and fallen walls. Suddenly, he stumbled upon a series of shallow, bizarre footprints. It was difficult to classify them as footprints. The left one appeared ordinary, but the right seemed more akin to a palm imprint. Another monster? Lumian stealthily trailed the footprints, all the while scrutinizing his environment and envisioning the ideal battlefield for various scenarios. Eventually, he detected movement, prompting him to halt. He skirted around the area and scaled a toppled building, using the scattered, hefty rubble as cover. Peering out cautiously, Lumian surveyed the source of the noise. There, in the center of an uncluttered wasteland, stood a figure that could scarcely be described as human. While vaguely humanoid in shape, closer inspection revealed a host of incongruities. 2 eyes occupied the space where a nose should have been. Above them, a mouth, and below, a pair of ears. The nose was nestled near the temples, while a leg and an arm replaced each shoulder. The lower half of the figure consisted of another leg and arm. The entire form seemed to have been haphazardly assembled from mismatched human components. This revelation instantly clarified the nature of the peculiar tracks Lumian had been following. The creature was garbed in a brown short-sleeved shirt and dark blue trousers, typical attire for lower-class Inticians. It paced the barren landscape, shoeless and hatless. Lumian refrained from attacking, opting instead to observe patiently. Before long, the monster raised an arm and contorted its body backward, its head making contact with the ground. It's incredibly flexible, it would make a great dancer. Lumian mused sardonically. As if on cue, the creature launched into a dance. Its movements alternated between bold and graceful, sometimes bizarre and comical, yet always rhythmic. More notably, the creature seemed to possess no skeletal structure, its limbs twisted and folded behind its back, and its legs and arms intertwined with ease. As the prankster king of Corda village, Lumian quickly devised a fitting moniker for his newfound quarry, Noodleman. Drawing on his observations, he began to formulate a strategy for the impending confrontation. I mustn't assume that I can evade its attacks simply by maneuvering behind it. Noodleman is capable of treating its front and back interchangeably. I must be wary of its potential to constrict me like a serpent, though its vital points remain uncertain. It does have a head. I'll start by chopping off that. As Lumian's thoughts raced, the monster's dance grew increasingly frenetic. It leaped skyward, limbs splayed as if attempting to embrace the heavens. Lumian found himself somewhat entranced, an urge to sway his body in sync with the creature's movements taking hold. He couldn't help but recall a melody his sister often played, the beat echoing through his mind, dum tch, dum tch. Suddenly, a warmth spread across his left pec as whispers seemed to reverberate in his skull. His scalp prickled and body shuddered, as though the phantom voice that had once pushed him to the brink of madness was about to speak again. Lumian hastily undid the buttons of his leather coat and gray shirt with his left hand and gazed at his bare chest. The inky thorn mark over his heart had returned. The bluish-black symbol, consisting of an eye and writhing worms, materialized and bore down on the former. Lumian froze in shock as his mind raced. I hadn't even entered cogitation, let alone held it for a few seconds. Did Noodleman's dance somehow trigger this? Is there something related to mysticism about that dance? Some hidden magic? Luckily, when the mark activates like this, the horrific whispers are nearly mute. It won't drive me to death's door or strip me of all restraint. But I'll suffer a skull-splitting migraine, uncontrollable tremors, and disorientation. Since becoming a hunter, Lumion had avoided entering that cogitation state to tap into his special trait. The danger seemed far greater now. Before, he had flirted with death and emerged unscathed. But now, hovering at death's door might cause him to lose all self-control, with irreparable consequences. Worse, excessive exposure to that ghastly whisper might drive him irreparably insane, even if he survived and retained control. He dared not take that risk again unless it was a last resort. After 2 or 3 seconds, Lumion was no longer astonished by the thorn symbol being stimulated by Noodleman's dance. An indescribable joy welled up in his heart. He could endure such a negative state completely. So, is there a chance that by learning Noodleman's dance, I can dance it ahead of time to partially activate the special trait of my dream when hunting powerful monsters? Then, I'll charge at the stunned target and finish it off in a few moves. Even if I can't fully trigger my special trait by dancing, it should be useful. I don't expect the target to give up resisting like the shotgun monster. It's enough to weaken them greatly. Lumion's thoughts raced. The more he watched the dancing Noodleman, the more he found it pleasing. The eyes on the nose, the mouth on the forehead, and the arm that acted as a leg. How could any of that be as beautiful as the magical dance? In the blink of an eye, Lumion felt a strong sense of cherishing such talent, allowing him to find a reason. Aurora said that we can't select talents with a uniform standard. So, why must it be a human and not a monster? He decided not to hunt the Noodleman before mastering the dance. He would come and observe it a few times every night to try to master it as soon as possible. Of course, he planned to experiment with the other party first. He wanted to see how the incomplete special trait would affect the monster. Lumion quickly made up his mind. He didn't button his clothes and bared his left chest. He circled around the cover and jumped from the collapsed house to the wasteland. Noodleman's dance abruptly halted. It began to tremble. It turned to Lumion, prostrated itself, and lay on the ground. Lumion stopped and didn't approach further, maintaining a safe distance. Noodleman didn't move. Lumion nodded imperceptibly and muttered to himself, even when facing my special trait that hasn't been fully activated, such a low-level monster will give up resisting and express its submission. I wonder what will happen to those at a higher level or those with beyonder characteristics. What I can be sure of is that the effect won't be as good. Lumion looked at Noodleman and smiled. Come on, dance again. Noodleman didn't dare look up. It was unknown if it understood what Lumion was saying. Seeing that his sincere words were ineffective, Lumion emphasized, quick, dance for your Pepe again. Noodleman's body trembled as it continued to prostrate. How can I communicate with it if monsters can't understand human language? Lumion felt a little helpless. He immediately put his newly acquired Hermes vocabulary to use and said, I need. Lumion didn't say another word and began a dance with his body movements. The monster didn't even acknowledge him as it pressed its face against the soil of the wasteland. Are you an imbecile? Lumion couldn't help but curse. He felt his scolding was unjustified. After all, which monster he had encountered was not stupid. Even the most intelligent shotgun monster was subdued by human intelligence. At that moment, Lumion felt the warmth in his chest dissipate. He instinctively lowered his head and noticed the thorn symbol and the bluish-black symbol vanish simultaneously. Lumion quickly shifted his gaze towards Noodleman. Noodleman happened to raise its head and looked at Lumion with its nose-located eyes. The man and monster stared at each other, stunned for a second. Thud, thud, thud. Lumion turned around and ran away. Noodleman leaped up and chased him ferociously. Lumion was well acquainted with the area. His running speed was faster than the uncoordinated monster, so he easily shook it off and circled back to the wasteland to hide in his original location. He didn't flee because he was afraid of the other party, but he was concerned that he might not be able to control himself if they really fought. He didn't know if he could find another dancing Noodleman in the dream ruins. Before learning that mysterious dance, he had no intention of hunting this strange monster. After waiting for a while, Lumion saw Noodleman return to the area. He nodded and muttered to himself, as expected, monsters have their own territory. They are accustomed to moving around or patrolling a certain route. This is very similar to wild beasts. Next, Lumion patiently waited for the dance that might not happen. After nearly 2 hours, he had expended quite a bit of his spirituality and felt a little hungry. Noodleman, who had rested for a long time, walked to the center of the wasteland and raised its arm and leg. Chapter 59, 59 again. 59 again. Noodleman danced once more, and Lumion confirmed that the mysterious dance could prevent the black thorn symbol on his chest from activating fully. It produced no terrifying sound, only an illusory whisper. This was highly advantageous for Lumion's special trait in the dreamscape. However, he discovered 2 problems. Firstly, Noodleman's dance moves were extremely difficult and violated the human body's structure. Only a monster with exaggerated flexibility like Noodleman could complete them. Although Lumion was a beyonder and a hunter with a greatly enhanced body, he had no confidence in replicating them himself. He feared that dancing even once would result in ligament tears, muscle strains, or worse, fractures. Secondly, the dance stirred the surrounding powers of nature and depleted Lumion's spirituality considerably. After watching it for the 3rd time, Lumion sighed silently, realizing he needed rest. I have to go back and rest after watching this. A hunter's spirituality is really useless. He was almost certain that the hidden existence corresponding to the thorn symbol was closely related to this dream ruin. The padre had a black mark on his body, and there was a dancing monster that could activate the thorn symbol. It would be surprising to say that it had nothing to do with the hidden existence. Lumion believed Aurora's guess even more, thinking of the similar symbol on the padre's chest and the dream ruins rebooting along with reality. The key to resolving the loop might be hidden in the depths of this place, playing a vital role. Is that why the mysterious lady kept hinting at me to unravel the secret of the dream ruins? The more Lumion thought about it, the more frustrated he became. He raised his left hand, which wasn't holding an axe, and made obscene gestures at the black thorn symbol on his chest. Ignoring the question of whether the hidden existence could sense or see him, Lumion felt that the problem wouldn't deteriorate any further, given that he had already fallen into a time loop thanks to him, and the people around him were becoming stranger and more dangerous. After watching the dance for the 3rd time, Lumion rubbed his somewhat empty head and left the ruins to return to his home on the other side of the wilderness, enduring the slight warmth in his chest. Before leaving the dream, he attempted to consolidate the dance movements he had memorized and almost sprained his back, broke his knee ligaments and tore his calf muscles. T, this isn't something an ordinary human can do. Lumion cursed and lay on the bed. As his spirituality was greatly drained, he quickly fell asleep. As Lumion awoke, the sky was just beginning to lighten. The sun had yet to rise, and the crimson moon had lost its luster. He sat up slowly, feeling the satisfaction of a deep sleep. His exhausted spirituality had been perfectly replenished. Walking to the window, Lumion drew back the curtains, allowing the light of dawn to flood the room. In the next moment, his eyes were fixed on the figure larger than an ordinary owl, perched on an elm tree not far away, staring down at him. Lumion quickly snapped out of his daze and opened his mouth. Aurora. Aurora. The suspect is here. Quick, follow it. Upon hearing the shout, the owl unfurled its wings and soared towards the edge of the village. It gradually descended and vanished into the forest bordering Corda village. Aurora, dressed in a white silk nightgown, entered Lumion's bedroom seconds later, her face contorted in irritation. Is it that owl again? Lumion gazed out of the window and replied, yes. Did white paper manage to follow it? Aurora pulled at her long blonde tresses and spat, why does it always appear at such ungodly hours? I was sound asleep when you woke me up. By the time I could release white paper, it had flown away. Lumion shot back, but you said you couldn't sleep well with something on your mind. Aurora rolled her eyes at him and sneered, humans tend to feel nervous, uneasy, and fearful at the beginning. Once they get used to it, they become numb to it. Only by sleeping well can they remain alert and rational. If you don't sleep well, it will affect your mental state and signs of losing control will surface. Lumion's expression was remorseful as he said, we can only wait for the next time. After a moment of contemplation, Aurora suggested, let's try to identify a pattern in its appearances. We can't keep waiting around all the time. We need to rest and cannot be on guard constantly. Lumion reminisced about the first few sightings. It's always in the latter half of the night and early morning hours. Why only during that period? Aurora inquired further. It seems more like an act than a pattern. Think carefully. Did you do anything or repeat the same actions on the corresponding nights when it appeared in the first half of the night? I was exploring the dream ruins, Lumion admitted to his sister as he began to recall. Before it first appeared, I killed the first monster in the dream. Before it appeared the second time, I activated the symbol on my chest through cogitation and discovered what was special about me. The third time, I consumed the potion in the dream and became a hunter. The fourth time, which is today, I discovered a way to activate my specialness in the dream to a certain extent while incurring less damage. How did you do it? Aurora asked eagerly. Lumion recounted Noodle Man's dance and his attempt. As Aurora listened, she thought about the owl. After her brother finished speaking, she deliberated and said, "The owl's visits seem to be related to significant progress in your exploration of the dream." Lumion thought for a moment before his eyes lit up. Indeed. The first time I killed a monster, the first time I displayed my specialness, the first time I consumed a potion and stepped onto the Beyonder path, the first time I found a way to make use of that specialness, similar major developments also have a certain reaction in reality. That owl sensed it and came over to observe. Hey, it smelled something. Aurora tersely acknowledged. In the future, we can deliberately create a similar opportunity to see if we can wait for that owl. I believe the next time it appears is after I master the mysterious dance and can truly use the specialness brought about by the symbol on my chest in my dream, Lumion pondered, revealing a malicious smile. When the time comes, I'll inform you before entering the dream. Be prepared. Aurora thought for a moment and nodded. I hope to figure out who the owl is related to and what role it plays in Corda's abnormality. Lumion seized the opportunity to inquire, Aurora, grande sir, do you possess any knowledge about that particular dance? As you are aware, my understanding of mysticism is still rudimentary. Aurora dragged a chair in front of Lumion's wooden table and settled in. After pondering for a moment, she responded, several notebooks have alluded to the existence of large-scale ritualistic magic during the early 5th epoch and throughout the 4th epoch. Those rituals entailed not only numerous sacrifices but also a multitude of participants. They employed specific dances to appease their desired entities in exchange for a response. In essence, it was a form of sacrificial ritual and magic. Dancing, from the outset, was believed to influence nature and facilitate communication with deities. Its effects resemble those of Beyonder language and the combination of herbs, essential oils, and other ingredients. In Aurora and Lumion's world, history was divided into 5 epochs. The first epoch was the Chaos epoch, followed by the Dark epoch, and then the Cataclysm epoch. However, Aurora had heard from a pen pal that the Cataclysm epoch was also known as the Glorious epoch. The 4th epoch was the Age of the Gods, or the Epoch of the Gods. The 5th epoch was the present day, which began 1,358 years ago and was referred to as the Iron Age. Of the 5 epochs, the history of the first 3 remained unverifiable, with only myths and legends surviving. The 4th epoch occasionally yielded documents, information, notebooks, ruins, mausoleums, ancient cities, and so on. Nevertheless, history seemed shrouded in a thick fog, with only a faint outline discernible. The theological texts of the 7 churches often recounted stories from the 4th epoch, which served as the only source of illumination. After listening to his sister's explanation, Lumion hazarded a guess. That Noodleman employs dance to appease the hidden entity that corresponds to the thorn symbol. Is it hoping to elicit a response or a boon? Perhaps a significant portion of its ritual is absent, resulting in an extremely weak effect. Or is the problem with the dream ruins causing a failure that can only trigger a tiny fraction of the power contained in the symbol within my body? Heh, it's as if I'm a god. Having witnessed Noodleman's dance and being pleased by it, I decided to highlight the symbol and offer a certain response. However, Lumion had no control over this. It was an automatic reaction of the thorn symbol. Aurora smiled and replied, "You are more like a carrier of that symbol, a tool, in a sense." She paused thoughtfully and said, "I suspect that the dance was specifically invented to please or communicate with the hidden entity that corresponds to the thorn symbol. Otherwise, it wouldn't have elicited a reaction from the symbol. Furthermore, based on your description, this is not something an ordinary person can accomplish. Only Beyonders with special enhancements can do so." Although I am familiar with the names of the corresponding Sequence 9 and Sequence 8 pathways, I have a certain level of understanding of them. None of them can execute that kind of dance, and Noodle Man's performance does not seem like that of a higher sequence. Otherwise, you would not have been able to escape. Perhaps it is not from the 22 pathways, but rather a boon from a hidden entity. Lumiere recalled the mysterious lady's words. Aurora looked out the window and pursed her lips. I wonder if this has anything to do with the circle inhabitant or a power equivalent to Sequence 9 or Sequence 8. Probably. Lumiere suddenly laughed. Let me name it. Noodleman, circle inhabitants corresponding Sequence 9. Aurora couldn't help but look up at the ceiling. The siblings chatted for a while before heading downstairs for breakfast. After studying Hermes until past 10, Lumiere departed with important items. Chapter 60, 60 Dancer. 60 Dancer. Lumiere was in no rush to track down Ryan, Leah, and Valentine. Instead, he headed straight for the OL Tavern, hoping to get lucky. If that enigmatic woman showed up, he had a slew of questions for her. Accepting her gift had bound him to some future cost. He might as well seize the chance to gain more benefits, as Aurora had advised. The instant Lumiere stepped into the OL Tavern, his eyes sparkled. The mysterious woman sat in her usual corner seat, 2 glasses of emerald absinthe before her. 2 glasses. She knew I'd come. Lumiere approached her with a smile and greeted her. Good morning. She wore a white blouse with vine leaf patterns at the collar and a beige ankle-length dress, a light red beret beside her. Lumiere, no stranger to his sister's fashion magazines, recognized this as Trier's latest trend. She glanced up at him. It's getting late. Almost noon. This is to fit your schedule, isn't it? Lumiere thought, annoyed. But seeing the enigmatic woman brought him a strange sense of calm. He sat and cut to the chase. I've been through a lot lately. She slid a glass of absinthe his way. The swirling green liquid was like a beacon of joy. She neither invited him to speak nor silenced him. Lumiere sipped the absinthe, finding it rich and invigorating, with a subtle bitter note. It tasted different from any absinthe he'd had before. What's this? He asked, puzzled. Another kind of absinthe, quite popular in Trier these days. To differentiate it from the original, people call it absinthe fennel. Authors, painters, and poets are particularly fond of it. She took a small sip. The green liquid in the clear glass seemed to possess a hypnotic hue. Absinthe's main ingredients were wormwood, fennel, and anise. Different producers used slightly varied recipes, some even adding lemon essential oils. Lumiere didn't understand her motives. Had she traveled to Trier just to bring back absinthe fennel? He didn't ask. Instead, he recounted recent events, both real and dreamed. She sipped from her small cup of absinthe fennel, listening quietly to Lumiere's account. That's about it. Can I learn that mysterious dance as quickly as possible? He asked, bluntly. He didn't bother inquiring about the loop's key or the dream's secret. Experience told him he wouldn't get a straight answer. The woman swirled her emerald liquid and smiled. Without a significant boost in flexibility, you'll never master it. You could force yourself through a portion, but you'd risk ligament and muscle tears. How would you hunt monsters then? Lumiere was attuned to the subtext in others' words. Is there a way to greatly increase my flexibility? She chuckled. That's for you to figure out. Lumiere was stumped by her cryptic hint. If she were a less mysterious acquaintance, he'd demand, explain yourself. Don't make me kneel and beg. As if reading his mind, she smiled and added, the solution to your flexibility lies within you. Huh. Lumiere looked perplexed. She sipped her absinthe fennel and sighed. Didn't your sister teach you ritualistic magic? Lumiere noticed the strange emotion flicker in her eyes once again. She did. His heart quickened. Pray to myself. She assessed him and laughed. Who do you think you are? What good would praying to you do? You can only summon the weakest creatures from the spirit world. Your spiritual perception improves with your body. Danger intuition, for example. Lumiere grasped the gist of her words. Though Hunter's spirituality was enhanced, it focused on spiritual perception and fell short in ritualistic magic and other mystical matters. So, what do I need to do? Lumian pressed. The lady sighed wearily. You've studied dualistic ritual law, haven't you? Yes. Lumian nodded. The lady sighed again. Luckily you have a sister. Otherwise, I'd have to teach you all this mystic mumbo-jumbo. Too tiresome. You mean you didn't tell me about ritual magic, cogitation, spirit vision, contracted creatures, or magic languages because it was too much hassle? You just showed up after Aurora finished teaching me. Lumian felt rage bubbling up inside him. He took a couple of deep breaths and said, dualistic rituals require items closely tied to deities or supernatural beings, but I don't have any. His voice trailed off as a thought struck him. The woman smirked and said, oh yes, you do. Don't you remember? Lumian jabbed a finger at his chest. The thorn symbol and the bluish-black symbol. The lady nodded before reminding, forget the bluish-black symbol. The key to a dualistic ritual is channeling the divine power in the object. If its power decreases, the balance in your body will be disrupted. And when that happens... She left the sentence hanging, but her expression told Lumian all he needed to know. In Aurora's usual grim words, no hope. Just wait for death. Is the bluish-black symbol protecting me from corruption? Lumian knew enough about the mysticism to recognize his current state as corruption. It's the great existence I mentioned protecting you, the woman said solemnly. Once you solve the secret of the dream ruins, I'll tell you his honorific name. You can pray to him directly. Did this great existence seal the corruption symbolized by the thorn in my heart, preventing it from corrupting me completely? Lumian didn't know if this great existence was good or evil, or had sinister intentions, but he felt an odd affinity with him on this. He thought for a moment and guessed, use a dualistic ritual to steal the power of the thorn symbol. If its power decreases, the corruption will weaken and the seal strengthen. How can you call it stealing? The lady retorted. This is appealing to an entity for a boon. It just so happens he has some of his power nearby. The response follows the law of proximity. Thanks to the seal from the great existence and barriers attenuating it, the entity's true form won't sense it. Only mystics like you who speak in riddles understand how to sugarcoat it. What's the difference between this and stealing? Lumian thought sourly. From the lady's explanation of divine boon and abnormal pathways, he asked shrewdly. Through the dualistic ritual, can I appeal to the power behind the thorn symbol and ask it to grant me the ability to greatly increase my flexibility? Something like that, the lady said. To be precise, ask it to grant you the power of dancer. Dancer. Lumian thought of Noodle Man's performance. The lady took a sip of absinthe and said, for beyonder pathways beyond the standard 22, we classify them into sequence 9 to sequence 0 for convenience. In a way, this sequence division follows the rules of this world. Does dancer correspond to sequence 9 of the thorn symbol, just as circle inhabitant corresponds to its sequence 4? Lumian fired off. Can it boost my flexibility and improve my mystic skills, allowing me to easily grasp that mysterious dance? The lady smiled in relief. As expected, with a foundation in mysticism, communication is much easier. No need for me to explain further. Lumian asked eagerly, then what are sequences 8, 7, 6 and 5 of the thorn symbol? Sequence 8 is alms monk, and sequence 7 is contractee. Gosh, why do you want to know so much? Master the ritual first and strive to become a dancer as soon as possible. The woman was losing patience. Alms monk. Contractee. These names instantly clicked for Lumian. Alms monk referred to certain members of the various churches in reality. The Eternal Blazing Sun Church was rife with factions, each with their own beliefs. Two main groups stood out, the Order of Preachers and the Brotherhood Minor, also known as the Alms Monk Brotherhood. The former was made up of clergymen and the purifiers of the Inquisition who were dedicated to the cruel persecution and purification of heretics, cultists, and wild beyonders, all in the name of promoting the orthodox teachings of the Eternal Blazing Sunday. The latter, however, were mainly concentrated in the cloisters, with a few clergymen among their ranks. They espoused temperance, begging for food and ascetic training, preaching in various poor places, all with the aim of spreading the faith of the Eternal Blazing Sunday. At the mention of the alms monk, Lumian immediately thought of missionaries, asceticism, and special ritualistic magic. As for contractee, the first thing that came to mind was the black mark on the padre and the mouth orifice monster. Aurora explained that it might be a mark left behind by a special contract. Wait, the monster I killed was a contractee? Lumion asked in surprise. I actually killed a monster equivalent to a Sequence 7. The lady nodded slightly and said, yes, contracts use special contracts and godhood provided by that existence as witnesses to obtain different powers from various creatures. One contract corresponds to one ability. Whether they're powerful or not depends on the abilities they obtain and how many they have. It's not impossible for ordinary people to kill them if they take the wrong path. In fact, similar situations occur in the Beyonder domain. It's common for Beyonders who aren't skilled in combat to be killed by those of an inferior sequence. Ability is important, as is intelligence. Preparation in advance is equally significant. Chapter 61, 61 Description. 61 Description. The more Lumion listened to the lady in front of him, the more he concurred. He was uncertain about what would happen at a higher sequence. Among the few Beyonder creatures he had interacted with, the threat posed by the fellow with the vortex-shaped proboscis was far inferior to the monster carrying a shotgun. Although he had become a Beyonder, significantly improving his close combat ability and exploitation of the environment, the problem primarily lay with the contractee monster. Firstly, it did not display a relatively strong pursuit ability. Secondly, it lacked long-range attacks. Thirdly, its invisibility ability was not ridiculous. It was completely countered by a hunter's grasp of the surrounding environment and minute traces. Moreover, it had the common problem of monsters. It did not have high intelligence and was not as combat intelligent as the shotgun monster. It had easily stepped into the enemy's trap. With all of this combined, the final outcome was obvious. Lumion just never expected it to be equivalent to a Sequence 7. He didn't even compare it to the shotgun monster, recognizing the vast difference between the two. The shotgun monster was a force to be reckoned with, while the mouth orifice monster was weak. Ability, intelligence, preparation, improvisation, environmental factors. There are too many variables that can affect the outcome of a battle. Lumion concluded inwardly and asked without much hope, can I directly pray for contractee powers? The lady chuckled. That's a good way to kill yourself. She casually explained, in theory, it's possible. After all, the power sealed in your body isn't limited to the Sequence 7 equivalent. But can your body withstand such a tremendous boon, or rather, corruption? If you don't mind turning into a monster, a puppet of that existence, or transforming into another creature, then go ahead. TSK, then it won't be long before I see you personally turning your sister into a sacrifice. Lumion's hair stood on end from the woman's words, and a chill ran down his spine, realizing that he wasn't ready to advance beyond his current level. He cautiously asked, so, the most significant boon I can handle right now is a dancer? Yes, that's why I waited for you to become a Beyonder and digest some of it before telling you about it, the woman explained, taking another sip of her green liquid. Only when your mind, spirituality, and body have improved significantly will you have a chance of resisting the corruption attached to the boon. Then, you can slowly control the power. As your soul body and body of heart and mind strengthen, and your body adapts to the slight changes brought about by the power of the boon, you can consider Om's monk. For Lumion, the most crucial thing was to learn the mysterious dance. Initiating the incomplete activation of the thorn symbol would significantly improve his ability to explore the dream ruins. Therefore, he nodded slightly, no longer thinking about Om's monk and contractee. How should I pray? He had already learned the duality ritual, but he still didn't know the target's honorific name, domain, and corresponding ingredients. Ahem, the lady coughed. Then, she spoke solemnly, what I'm about to say shall leave my mouth and enter your ears. You must not tell anyone, or you'll harm them. Leave my mouth and enter your ears. This is a sentence Aurora likes to write. Has this lady read one of her novels? Lumion thought. I understand. He thought for a moment and asked, will anything go wrong from hearing it? The lady took a sip of absinthe fennel and smiled. When did you have the illusion that there's nothing wrong with you? Lumion was stunned for a moment before looking down at his left pec. The lady scoffed. You belong to the group of individuals who are on the brink of being corrupted. Luckily, the mark left by that great existence was activated, and the corresponding power descended upon you, sealing the source of corruption and establishing balance. Next, you will perform a ritual to confront the power within the seal and pray for the corresponding blessings. It is akin to proactively withstanding a certain level of corruption. So, why should you be afraid of minor issues that you hear? The more I hear, the more I feel that there's a huge problem. Lumian wasn't too confident. The lady shook her head and smiled. Do not fret. When I reveal the corresponding words, I will provide you with a sufficiently concealed environment and secure protection. In the future, it would be best to perform the ritual in the ruins, where there is gray fog and the protection of the great existence. It will not directly draw the attention of that entity. Furthermore, before the ritual, scramble every segment and description. Attempt not to piece them together and analyze them in a complete manner. Otherwise, hey. She chuckled and did not elaborate on the outcome, but Lumian could imagine what would occur. Observing that he did not inquire further, the woman nodded slightly. Let us commence. The first part is the power of inevitability. Using it is sufficient. It corresponds with your black thorn symbol. The complete name of that being is not something you can comprehend at the moment. Even I must provide some concealment before daring to contemplate it. For some reason, Lumian felt the light around him diminish slightly, but he was unsure. At that moment, the woman controlled her expression and said solemnly, the second part is. You are the past, the present, and the future. You are the reason, the result, and the process. As the lady enunciated each word with precision, Lumian felt his senses spin. He realized that a vortex of dark wind was enveloping him. The table, on which his absinthe fennel rested, writhed as if imbued with a life force of its own. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed. An ebony worm, as long as an adult's index finger, slithered out of the wooden board, and an ominous aura spread instantaneously. Before Lumian could observe the worm's features, the woman sitting across from him lowered her cup filled with the green liquid and slammed it onto the grotesque creature, reducing it to a pulpy mess. Next, the woman produced a patterned napkin, wiped the glass's base clean, and wrapped the worm's remains in it. She took another sip of the absinthe fennel, as if nothing untoward had occurred, and emphasized, remember, the first and second parts must be recited in ancient Hermes. Jotun, Dragonese, and Elvish are acceptable as well. Similar to how the initial I in the rite that worships oneself cannot be in Hermes. Lumian nodded to indicate his comprehension. Although he had always been audacious, he felt slightly discomfited and uneasy when confronted with the strange phenomena that kept manifesting during their conversation. His heart raced, but the enigmatic woman acted as if she had merely detected some impurities in their meal. She continued. The third part can be spoken in Hermes. The text is as follows. I implore you. I beseech your benediction. I plead with you to grant me the power of dancer. Remember, the three sentences are progressive. These words did not elicit a new environmental shift. The anomalies that had caused Lumian's unease and trepidation gradually subsided. Lumian committed them to memory earnestly and followed the woman's instructions to scramble the words, to prevent any potential issues. The woman savored the remaining absinthe fennel with satisfaction. The rest of the ritual is similar to common ritualistic magic. The corresponding ingredients are gray amber, tulips, cloves, and deer musk. Choose any two to make candles. The remaining two can be used as herbs, essential oil, and extract during the ritual. Lumian furrowed his brow as he recalled the dualistic ritual he had learned. The spot representing the deity should have an item that's closely related to the deity, but my thorn symbol is on my chest. I can't skin it, right? Besides, I doubt it's useful even if I skin it. The power was sealed in his heart and spirit body. The woman nodded slightly. Didn't I tell you to make candles? When making the candle, take 5 milliliters of blood from your chest. It doesn't matter if it's more or less. In any case, fuse it into the material and let it become a part of the candle. In the ritual, the candle is placed in the deity's location. There's only one candle. Because of your blood, the candle is awakened by ancient Hermes. After becoming a symbol, it will point directly at you. Then, with the subsequent description, it will activate the power sealed in you to a certain extent. It feels like a special variant of the dualistic ritual. Aurora didn't mention that it could be done like this, so not many people know about it. Lumian thought for a moment and asked, can I use perfume with gray amber? He remembered that his sister had it, and she liked to call gray amber ambergris. The woman nodded. Sure, use it like an essential oil. I possess the grey amber in that case. I have some cloves at home. Lumion pondered where he could acquire tulips and deer musk. After much contemplation, he could only come up with 3 possibilities. Firstly, Aurora, being a warlock, might have already prepared the required materials. Secondly, the materials could be found at the administrator's residence. Thirdly, the Padre's house could be a potential source. Lumion decided to inform his sister about the ritual and break down the instructions into individual words. He planned to learn the corresponding ancient Hermes and Hermes words from her and inquire about the availability of the materials. If she didn't have them, he would explore other options. As the lady was about to depart, Lumion hastily questioned, "What was that lizard that crawled out of the deputy padre's mouth?" The lady smiled and replied, "I cannot explain it to you." Lumion struggled to maintain his composure and thought, "Why not just say you don't want to tell me?" After the lady left, Lumion retrieved the pen and paper he had brought and jotted down the ritual instructions in a disordered manner. He then numbered them in the correct sequence. Upon leaving Ol Tavern, Lumion scoured the village for the trio of foreigners. It didn't take long before he heard a faint tinkling sound. Lumion's lips curved into a smile as he quickened his pace. As expected, Leah wore 2 bells on her veil and boots, Ryan donned a dark bowler hat, and Valentine had sprinkled powder on his head. Lumion had an urge to open his arms and exclaim, "My cabbages, I missed you so much," but he quickly remembered that he had not interacted with the foreigners in this cycle. He needed his face to appear more serious and strode towards Ryan and the others. As he brushed past them, he lowered his voice and said, "I know who you're searching for." Ryan, Leah, and Valentine gaped at him in astonishment. Lumion didn't pause, he continued walking forward. The 3 foreigners exchanged glances, suppressed their peculiar expressions, and followed behind Lumion as if nothing had happened. Chapter 62, 62 Date. 62 Date. Lumion halted at the forest's edge, a short distance from his house, and glanced back at Leah and the others. This spot was quite secluded, with no villagers passing through. The forest was thinly populated, making it easy to spot anyone hiding nearby. As the tinkling sounds drew nearer, Leah asked with a smile, "How do you know we're looking for someone?" Lumion remained silent. He pulled out the essential item he had brought with him. The lever blue from home. He lifted the item and showed Ryan and the others the pages where some words had been cut out. Without hesitation, Ryan nodded and said, "So you wrote the letter for help." They had never mentioned a help letter in Cordu, let alone detailed that the letter was assembled from words cut from a lever blue. Unless the other party had a key informant in Bigor, it had to be the letter writer. Leah instinctively looked around. The 2 small silver bells hanging from the veil above her head oddly didn't make a sound. Valentine was about to ask what was weird about the people around him when Ryan asked, puzzled, "How can you be sure that we're here because of that letter?" "You told me yourself." Lumion smiled. "There are very few foreigners who come to Cordu to begin with. Even fewer who don't buy wool, cheese, and lambs and only wander around the village to chat with people. Besides, I didn't say anything. I just showed you this lever blue." Realization hit Leah, and she laughed. "So it's just a test?" "That's a brilliant idea. Those who don't know the letter won't understand your intentions, so they won't be too suspicious. At most, they'll think it's a prank, and you're the prankster king of Cordu." Ryan nodded slightly. This seemingly innocent line revealed that the trio had gleaned something from chatting in Cordu over the past few days. At the very least, they had identified the more prominent villagers and taken appropriate measures. Lumion immediately flashed a teasing smile. "You believed it. You seriously believed it." Seeing Ryan and the others' astonishment, he added, "I was just joking. I'll tell you the real reason later." Leah gritted her teeth. "As expected of the prankster king of Cordu. Aren't you afraid that we won't believe what you're about to say? You can choose not to believe it." Lumion wore an indifferent expression. "Or you can verify it yourself." Valentine, visibly dissatisfied, asked anxiously, "In your letter, you mentioned that the people around you are getting weirder. What's so weird about them?" Lumion exclaimed and cracked his knuckles. "There's plenty. To be precise, the Padre believing in an evil god, Shepherd Pierre Barry turning people into sheep and herding them back to Cordu. Madame Pualis rides a demon-drawn carriage through the wilderness. When the deputy padre sleeps, a translucent lizard-like creature crawls out of his mouth. Naroka is clearly not dead, but she wants to go to Paramitha. Louis Lund, the administrator's male butler, has just given birth to a baby. The owl from the Warlock legends flies back to the village from time to time. Ryan, Leah, and Valentine grew increasingly shocked as they listened. They didn't want to believe it, but they felt that the kid before them couldn't invent so many absurd stories. They were all seasoned official investigators who had dealt with numerous Beyonder incidents, many involving evil gods and mystic arts. However, none were as ludicrous or exaggerated as what they were hearing now. Only the padre believing in evil gods sounded normal. More importantly, most of the incidents they had previously handled stood independently. At most, 2 or 3 would occur simultaneously. Moreover, they were closely related to each other, but Corda had too many horrifying abnormalities. What kind of place is this? Almost instantly, similar thoughts raced through Leah, Ryan, and Valentine's minds. They suspected they had inadvertently entered the legendary abyss or hell. When Lumion stopped, Leah couldn't help but ask, "You're not joking, are you? Was there anyone normal in this village?" Lumion smiled. "I haven't finished speaking. There's another abnormality. This is the 3rd or 4th time I've talked to you about something like this. Ryan, Leah, Valentine, my cabbages." Ryan, Leah, and Valentine weren't surprised that Lumion knew their names. It was inevitable when they had been chatting in the village. They were even more astonished and puzzled by the first half of the sentence. "What do you mean?" Valentine asked with a frown. "What I mean is that we've been repeatedly experiencing the past few days. In other words, we've fallen into a time loop." Lumion didn't let the 3 foreigners guess and provided a standard answer. Without waiting for Ryan and the others to question him, he briefly mentioned what they had experienced together and finally said, "Think back carefully. Was it really March 29th when you entered the village?" Leah and the others racked their brains. After more than 10 seconds, Valentine revealed a pained expression. "My sense of time is hazy. I can't remember the exact date of the previous 2 months. But I remember. I remember celebrating my youngest son's birthday before I set off. His birthday is..." Valentine raised his head and blurted out in shock, "April 10th. In other words, the actual date now is mid to late April. Judging from the looks of it, the number of cycles I went through before I had my memories wiped can't be more than a couple. It can't even be more than once. Yes, that was the first cycle. The loop hadn't even begun, so I could send a letter without the river's help. When the loop happened and time rewound, the corresponding memories would be replaced, but material objects beyond the range wouldn't be able to turn back." Lumion had a new theory about the letter. He nodded imperceptibly and said to Ryan and Leah, "You can also wire the outside world and get the current date in a way that won't raise any red flags. When the time comes, you'll believe me." "Yes, yes. Send a telegram." Valentine snapped out of his stupor. "Ask the higher-ups for help." Lumion looked at him as if he were a fool. "Ask for help? In the face of such a bizarre time loop, what do you officials usually do?" Ryan fell silent for a moment before saying, "Stamp it out directly to prevent the corruption from spreading. Therefore, asking for help now is as good as suicide." Lumion smiled and shrugged. Valentine replied fervently, "According to the rules, we have to report back ASAP. I'm willing to sacrifice myself for this." Lumion was stunned. Such people exist. "No, I have to get rid of this guy immediately, or everyone will die together." Fortunately, Leah and Ryan clearly felt that they could still be saved. They exchanged a glance and nodded. Ryan patted Valentine's shoulder and said, "Stay calm. We still don't know what's going on. Perhaps there's a better solution. If we really can't save ourselves, we'll report it to the higher-ups." "That's right," Lumion hurriedly added. He recounted the discoveries and speculations minus the symbol on his chest, the dream ruins, the mysterious lady, and the curly-haired baboons research society. Finally, he said, "The key to the problem most likely happens on the 12th night. We have to survive until then. Only then can we truly resolve the issue in the next cycle." Seeing that he had revealed so many details and that they could verify them all, Ryan and the others were completely inclined to believe him. Valentine calmed down and remembered his wife and children. Leah exhaled. No wonder you know us and know we're looking for someone. It turned out that they had communicated in a previous cycle. She subconsciously touched the silver bell above her head, wanting to do a divination, but she held back when she recalled the abnormalities Lumiere had described. She didn't want to blow up because of a divination that shouldn't be done before the real investigation began. Ryan thought for a moment and said to Lumiere, "You're telling us this because you want us to cooperate with you and your sister." "Very astute, my cabbage." Lumiere laughed and said seriously, "First, wire the outside world, saying that your investigation has made some progress. The Padre seems to have a certain issue. Then, ask what the lizard-like thing that crawls out of a mouth is. This is the least likely to cause a destructive blowout of all the abnormalities. Ah, right, confirm the real date and be careful in how it's done. Don't let anyone outside suspect anything. Secondly, my sister will invite Madame Pualis to my house for afternoon tea this afternoon. I hope that you can sneak into the administrator's mansion with me and do a search. As for the future, it depends on the information we obtain today." Ryan, Leah, and Valentine looked at each other and felt that Lumiere's request wasn't too unreasonable. This was what they would have done. The four of them arrived at the village square. Ryan went to wire the outside world while Leah, Valentine, and Lumiere waited under the elm tree outside. After calming down, Leah glanced at Lumiere and asked curiously, "You're a Beyonder, and so is your sister?" "Yes." Lumiere didn't hide it. Leah laughed. "Aren't you afraid of being arrested by us? We're in the same boat now. In the face of an emergency where the boat is about to sink, we can only help each other." Lumiere shrugged. "As for the future, we'll talk about it later. It's still unknown if we can escape this loop." "That's true." Leah turned her head and looked at Valentine. The reason why she brought up this topic was to let her companion understand this and not do anything stupid. Valentine's expression remained cold as he nodded imperceptibly. Leah then asked about something she was more concerned about. "Why can you keep the memories from before?" "I'm not telling you." Lumiere laughed. Without waiting for Leah's response, he spread his hands and said, "I'm just joking. Actually, I'm not sure either. I somehow retained my memories, and it's only from the last 2 cycles. Think back to what happened back then." "Perhaps this is very important," Leah said after some thought. Lumiere said sincerely, "I've been thinking, but I haven't figured out anything. Perhaps I'll only suddenly realize when I encounter something." Leah was about to help analyze the situation when Ryan, who had received a reply, walked out of the administration building. Chapter 63, 63 Shocking News. 63 Shocking News. Leah and Valentine asked Ryan in unison, "How is it?" Although they had already believed Lumiere's words, it was inevitable for people to hope for luck. They still held on to the hope that perhaps the problem wasn't that serious because the kid wasn't knowledgeable enough to exaggerate. Ryan looked around and saw that there was no one else around the elm tree. He spoke in a low voice, "I was afraid to ask too directly. I only know that the real date is already late April. I don't know the exact date." Leah and Valentine fell silent. They had indeed fallen into a strange time loop. Judging from the various files and information, this was definitely not something the 3 of them should face or deal with. They were seasoned Beyonders who had handled many Beyonder incidents. It was the first time they had encountered such a serious and abnormal situation. Leah couldn't help but turn to look at Lumiere. What kind of place is Cordu? There were abnormalities everywhere, each more exaggerated than the last. I don't know either. Lumiere had an innocent expression. Before the loop, this place was beautiful and the people were simple. Everyone was normal and hospitable. He didn't tell the 3 foreigners that the person standing before them was also one of the abnormalities. Ryan sighed and said, I've never encountered so many abnormalities at once, and every one of them is serious. This is the most dangerous situation I've ever faced, echoed Valentine. Lumiere was already a little numb to this. He sneered and said, it's normal that you haven't encountered it before, because those who have encountered one are dead. Leah looked at him with a smile. Don't say anything if you can't say something nice. People like you won't survive past childhood elsewhere. Killed in the cradle. Lumiere mocked himself and asked Ryan, "Did you get an answer about the deputy padre?" Ryan nodded. In the past few years, similar legends have emerged in various places across the northern and southern continents. Legend has it that heaven banished a group of sinful elves to the ground. They can only reside within human bodies, hoping to redeem their sins and gain absolution before returning to heaven. In some versions of the legend, these elves appear as translucent lizards. However, the elf I'm referring to is not the ancient elf race. It is more akin to a mixture of fairies and various spirits. Again in recent years. Lumiere recalled that the legend of Madame Night had only surfaced recently. What was wrong with this world? He pondered for a moment before asking, "Did they specify which deity's heaven it is?" Ryan shook his head. What's remarkable is that every person who claims to have seen an elf believes it is from the kingdom of their local deity. The local deity referred to the orthodox gods of the local faith. Heavens of different deities. Lumiere gazed up at the azure sky. Did that lizard-like elf come from the sky? However, according to Aurora, beyond the sky lay the cosmos. Each star represented a world. So, were these extraterrestrial beings? Or were they from an astral plane beyond mysticism? As Lumiere's thoughts raced, he asked curiously, in some versions of the legend, these elves appear as translucent lizards. What about the other details? Ryan shook his head once more. That's all they could uncover in a short period. They may need to communicate with headquarters for more information. Leah pondered and spoke, "I am familiar with the legend of elves. I once met a native of Lenberg who shared that farmers in many regions of the south-central zone have reported mischievous fairies in recent years. These creatures known as Alpies would vandalize their homes and fields or play pranks on them. The south-central zone referred to the area where Lenberg, Mason, Seeger, and other small countries were located. It also included a few areas in the Intis Republic, the Lone Kingdom, and the Fainapotter Kingdom. Most of them were located in the highlands, mountains, forests, areas filled with ruins and legends." Lumiere listened attentively and concluded, "This is not an isolated phenomenon, each elf seems to have their unique way of causing trouble," Ryan mused. "And the lizards that inhabit human bodies are perhaps the most malevolent. It is uncertain if they are the most dangerous. With so many abnormalities in Cordu, the parasitic elf shouldn't be an isolated phenomenon. Perhaps someone wants to use it to control the deputy padre." Very clear line of thinking. Lumiere looked at the villagers who were returning home after finishing their work and said to Leah and the others, "Meet me behind the hill where the administrator's castle is at 3:30 p.m. Will you join me to search for clues?" Of course, Ryan agreed. Leah, however, called out to Lumiere before he left, "Is that all? You should brief us on the situation in the castle, its inhabitants, and Madame Puali's abnormality. We cannot explore and search without preparation." Lumiere did not want to recall Madame Puali's matters, but he had to admit that Leah's request made sense. He had to endure the discomfort and tell them the entire story. Ryan and the others were mentally prepared, but they still looked a little dull upon hearing the tale. Leah lightened the mood with her tinkling laughter. "It does not matter to me. I might experience such a thing in the future. This is an opportunity that most men never encounter. You must cherish it." However, Valentine ignored her joke and whispered with a cold expression, "All of this needs to be purified, purified." Lumiere did not want to provoke Valentine and waved his hand. "See you in the afternoon." After taking a few steps, Lumiere turned around to look at Ryan warily and asked, "Did Bertrand have any knowledge of the contents of your telegram?" Bertrand was responsible for the telegraph, and if he knew about the date and the legend of the elves, it meant that the administrator knew as well. And if the administrator knew, Madame Puali's would know too. "Don't worry," Ryan said reassuringly. "We have a secret code. He won't be able to decipher it." Lumiere breathed a sigh of relief only then and left the village square, heading back to his building. As he walked a distance away, he spotted Ava Lizier herding a flock of white geese back home. "Hey there, isn't this our spring elf?" Lumiere tried to push the bloody and cruel scenes from the Lent celebration out of his mind and greeted Ava with his usual quip. Ava seemed a little embarrassed. "I haven't been chosen yet." Her exquisite facial features made her grayish-white dress look less rustic. "That won't be a problem," Lumiere said with a smile. Raimund and I will help you campaign for votes. Ava looked surprised. You don't know. What don't I know? Lumien's heart skipped a beat. Had something happened in the village that wasn't a part of the historical process? Ava observed his expression and suspected that he was teasing her. After a few seconds, the girl frowned in concern and said, Raimund's missing. You didn't know? Huh. Lumien was so shocked that he couldn't hide his expression as usual. In the previous cycle, he and Raimund Gregg had met almost every day from the second day of March 30th until April 5th, Lent. Back then, they had followed the waterside ritual procedure to lift Raimund, who had thrown the last offering, and throw him into the river. Like the others in the past, Raimund swam further away and could only return home after leaving the ritual site. He wouldn't leave the house until night. In the 2 cycles that followed, Lumien had too much to do and didn't have time to find Raimund. But now, Ava was telling him that Raimund was missing today. This was something that had never happened in the previous cycle. Upon seeing Lumien's expression, Ava's aqua-blue eyes cleared of confusion. You really have no idea. Raimund's father may come to you today to ask where Raimund has gone. Lumien suppressed the tumultuous waves in his heart and asked, when did Raimund disappear? Could it be that something happened because I didn't follow the historical process of finding him? 2 days ago, Ava recalled. It said that he didn't return after leaving the house in the afternoon of the 29th. His family assumed he was at OL Tavern or chatting with the Green Watchers. They only began searching for him last night. They should be asking you today. She paused and lowered her voice. They suspect Raimund of sneaking away because he doesn't want to learn how to shepherd. They think I instigated him, and are questioning me later. Lumien roughly understood what had happened. The afternoon of the 29th reminded him of the beginning of the cycle. The last 2 cycles had started on the afternoon of the 29th. In other words, Raimund disappeared from the beginning of the cycle. This means that perhaps no one deliberately changed the course of history because it was too late. Then why is there such an anomaly and difference? Lumien fell into deep thought. Ava glanced at him and asked softly, do you know where Raimund went? I haven't seen him in the past few days, Lumien said truthfully. He began to suspect that Raimund's disappearance had something to do with being thrown into the river during the previous cycle. However, it was impossible for Raimund to leave Cordu because of this. That would trigger the loop. After bidding farewell to Ava, Lumien forced himself to remain calm and returned home. He couldn't be bothered to discuss anything else. Initially, he divulged Raimund's disappearance to Aurora. Aurora's countenance turned solemn as she furrowed her brows and whispered, if you hadn't mentioned it, I would have completely forgotten about this person. She donned a simple rose-red dress and paced back and forth. Lumien began to contemplate potential reasons. After a while, Aurora gazed at her brother and uttered solemnly, I recollect that the crux of the Lent waterside ritual is to offer sacrifices to the concept of a water source symbolized by the river. Is it probable that Raimund, who was thrown into the water, was also regarded as a sacrifice and was taken away by a certain entity? Subsequently, as there was no corresponding tangible reward, the cycle portrayed his absence as a disappearance. Lumien shook his head. That will trigger the cycle. Humans departing Cordu and the surrounding vicinity acted as a trigger. Aurora asked in a profound voice, what if it's in the form of a corpse? Chapter 64, 64 Weapon. 64 Weapon. In the form of a corpse. Lumien's heart sank upon hearing that. If Raimund's body had left the loop due to the sacrifice, he wouldn't be able to revive through the loop. Once the abnormality in Cordu was resolved, he would truly be dead and not just missing. Although Lumien wasn't willing to admit that a foolish chap like Raimund was his friend, they had known each other for almost 5 years. They had played together, pranked together, and experienced many things together. Regardless, he couldn't treat him as a stranger. Recalling the past, he realized that other than Aurora, Raimund was probably the person he interacted with the most. Didn't Aurora often say that the fools are the lucky ones? Why is this happening? Lumien couldn't help but retort, even if he became a corpse, there will still be a spirit. It will trigger the cycle. Aurora sighed softly. Perhaps the entity receiving the sacrifice isn't interested in spirits and only wants flesh and blood. Perhaps he didn't want to trigger the loop and only wanted flesh and blood instead of Raimund's spirit, leaving him in Cordu or directly destroying him. In that case, Raimund's corpse was equivalent to pure matter without any spirituality. It could leave the loop without triggering a reboot. Upon hearing his sister's retort, Lumien's mind instantly replayed what might have happened. After everyone left the water, Raimund swam further away. Suddenly, an invisible force grabbed his legs, covered his mouth, and dragged him to the depths of the river, where he drowned. After that, his spirit would remain at the bottom of the river or be destroyed. His corpse would drift to an unknown place and become a sacrifice. At this thought, Lumien suddenly became inspired. Regardless of whether Raimund's spirit was left behind or destroyed, once the cycle restarts, he should appear in the form of a ghost. Logically speaking, that's correct. Aurora nodded thoughtfully. After dark, I'll hold a psychic ritual and see if I can find Raimund's spirit. Yes, it's best if we have something he often uses as a medium. Lumien replied without hesitation. After exploring the castle in the afternoon, I'll go to Raimund's place. His parents are looking for me to ask about his whereabouts anyway. When the time came, with his hunter skills and Lumien's vigilance, it wouldn't be difficult for him to obtain an item that Raimund had used. Okay. Aurora didn't object. Lumien exhaled and asked, Aurora, grande sir, are you capable of channeling spirits? As a mystery prior, I possess knowledge on various subjects. Aurora chuckled in self-deprecation. How did your conversation with the three foreigners go? Lumien quickly recounted his discussion with the enigmatic lady and his conversation with Ryan, Leah, and Valentine, but he avoided mentioning the entity's prayer. Aurora listened attentively and let out a sigh. It's perilous to actively resist corruption, but it's the only way to explore the dream ruins, uncover their secrets, and find the key to break the cycle. It'll be a difficult journey for you. What's so terrible about it? Lumien patted his chest. I'm saving myself. Aurora nodded slightly. You can use my gray amber perfume. We have lilac at home, and I also have deer musk and candle-making ingredients. Only tulips need to be acquired elsewhere. I remember Madame Puali's has a garden, but I don't know if it's blooming. It has bloomed, Lumien affirmed with certainty. During the last cycle, when he and Aurora visited the castle to borrow the carriage, they noticed that many flowers in the garden had already bloomed, which was unusual for early spring in the mountains. Aurora acknowledged tersely. Regardless, you must explore the castle in the afternoon. You can pick a few flowers while you're at it. Will that woman send those items into the dream ruins for you? Yes, Lumien replied, feeling confident in his assumption. Aurora pondered for a moment before saying, I'll give you the integrity brooch before you depart this afternoon. Madame Puali's castle is filthy, and it might involve the undead. It could be very useful. It's not necessary. Keep it with you to protect yourself from Madame Puali's, Lumien insisted, anticipating his sister's objections. Valentine is a fanatical believer of the eternal blazing Sunday. According to you, as a Beyonder, he should have chosen the sun pathway. He would be more useful than the integrity brooch. Based on Aurora's observations over the past few years, fanatical believers of the eternal blazing sun typically chose the sun pathway. This also made sense. Eternal blazing sun believers who chose the sun pathway tended to become more and more fanatical unless they didn't believe in this true God from the beginning. That's true, Aurora conceded. You can practice the simplest way to activate spirit vision. Afterward, take a nap at noon to replenish your energy. I'll teach you the ancient Hermes and Hermes words required for the ritual tonight. Upon hearing his sister's words, Lumien suddenly recalled something she often said when she was rushing her manuscripts: the schedule is tight, and the task is enormous. At 3:20 p.m., Lumien stood on the hillside overlooking the administrator's castle when he spotted Madame Puali's approaching the village with her lady's maid, Kathy. Madame Puali's wore a stunning grayish-blue dress that had a slight fluffiness to it, and her hair was tied back in an elegant bun. As soon as they were out of sight, Lumien hurried to the back of the hill where Ryan, Leah, and Valentine were already waiting. They appeared to be in their original clothes, having made no preparations for what was to come. Lumien was surprised to see that they were unarmed and asked, "You're not carrying any weapons?" Ryan, who was only slightly taller than 1.7 meters, smiled and replied, "I don't need to carry a weapon with me." Valentine, dressed in a white vest and a thin blue tweed coat, echoed Ryan's sentiment, "I don't need a weapon." Leah, on the other hand, pulled out a small, exquisite, silver revolver from her Mousseline boots. "This is my weapon." She flipped open the barrel to reveal different colored bullets engraved with various patterns and symbols. "They have different Beyonder effects." "Pa." Leah snapped the barrel shut and asked Lumière with a smile, "What weapon did you bring?" "One of you doesn't need a weapon, the other doesn't need to carry a weapon with him, and one has such a good-looking and powerful revolver. It makes me look silly." He lifted the dark jacket on his back to reveal an iron-black axe tucked into his belt. Without waiting for Ryan and the others to speak, he sighed and said, "You all act like Beyonders, and I'm like a gangster preparing for a fight." Leah chuckled, her bells tinkling along. "You have a talent for self-deprecation." "It's better than being mocked by others," Lumière pointed to the steep hill behind them. "Let's climb up now. We can't waste any more time." "All right." Leah, in her tight dress, was the first to climb. She moved with agility and her balance was exceptional. Using the grooves in the terrain, she ascended the hill with ease. What was even more remarkable was that the 4 silver bells on her person remained motionless and silent. Lumière followed closely behind, using the hunter potion to strengthen his body and scaling the previously unclimbable hill with the help of rocks and tree roots, although he wasn't as carefree and nimble as his companion. After regaining his balance, he glanced back and witnessed Ryan seizing Valentine's shoulder and hoisting him up. In a swift motion, Ryan vaulted onto a jutting boulder amidst the hill. Without hesitation, he sprang forward once more, delivering Valentine to Lumière and Leah's vicinity. Throughout the entire endeavor, his physique appeared to have expanded in size. This left Lumière in awe. Although the hill wasn't high, it was still too exaggerated to be scaled with just 2 jumps. Hunters definitely couldn't do it. After snapping out of his daze, Lumière looked at the castle-shaped building with 2 towers and the surrounding garden. He suggested to the 3 foreigners, "We'll go around to the back door." "Wait a moment." Ryan stopped him and glanced at Leah. Leah remained silent and strode 2 steps towards the rear entrance of the castle-like structure. Her lips moved soundlessly, muttering something under her breath. In the next instant, the 4 small silver bells attached to her veil and boots jingled. The sound was not deafening, but it was urgent and intense. Leah pivoted and addressed Lumière and the rest. "It's a treacherous path." "A grave problem, indeed." With that, she took 2 steps towards the front entrance. Ding, ding, ding. The bells continued to ring, growing even more insistent and pressing. "We'll likely encounter significant trouble if we attempt to enter through the front." Leah's tone was severe, but there was a hint of a smile on her face. "What if we climb in through a window?" Ryan inquired. Leah nodded and altered course, making her way towards the garden. This time, although the bells rang, they were faint and slow. Leah grinned and exhaled. "This route is safe." Lumière, who had observed the entire process, felt bewildered. He couldn't fathom what the 3 foreigners were up to. Is this how Beyonders operate? He recollected his sister's teachings and queried, divining the danger. "Indeed." Leah nodded and turned to Valentine. "I'll scout ahead. Be prepared." "Understood," Valentine responded gravely. "What preparations?" Lumière asked, confused. Leah chuckled. "Prepare to cast divine spells and conjure flames." "Then, what's the purpose of creating flames?" Before Lumière could ask, Leah had strolled into the garden and headed towards the castle. She arrived at a window and signaled that everything was clear. "Let's go," Ryan informed the group as he hastened towards Leah. Valentine and Lumière followed closely behind. As they passed a bed of tulips, Lumière reached out to pluck one, but Ryan stopped him with his forearm. He didn't ask Lumière why he was doing this and only said gently, "There's no hurry. We can pick flowers later. If picking it causes some incident, our mission will be compromised." "That's true." Lumière fully drew upon this experience. Soon, they arrived at a row of windows on the side of the castle. Chapter 65, 65 3rd floor. 65 3rd floor. The administrator's official residence was originally the castle of the Dirige nobles, with defense being the top priority. The windows were narrow and high up, making the lighting poor even during the day. However, to make it suitable for living, the owner had installed many new glass windows on the ground floor later on. Lumian peered through the patterned glass and saw that the banquet hall was empty and deserted. There are very few servants, Leah sighed softly. With many open windows during the day, fresh air mixed with the fragrance of flowers flowed in, creating excellent conditions for Lumian and the others to infiltrate. Taking advantage of the lack of servants on the first floor, the four of them climbed into the hall one after another. However, they didn't rush to go deeper and instead found a hiding spot nearby. Leah turned her head towards Valentine, who was clinging close behind an ornamental pillar, and said, "I'll scout ahead, make preparations." "Okay," Valentine nodded coldly. Lumian was squatting behind a stone platform with a porcelain vase. When he heard this, he stuck his head out and reminded them. "There's no need to explore the first floor. It's often used to entertain guests, so there's nothing unusual." Ever since Administrator Beast and Madame Pualis moved in, his sister Aurora would visit the castle occasionally as a guest or borrow a pony. A few times, Lumian took the opportunity to follow her and freeload on cakes, bread, and drinks. When the administrator and Madame Pualis were out, he would occasionally look for Louis Lund, the butler, and tour the first floor with him. "I'll head straight to the stairs," Leah said, understanding. She didn't attempt to walk in a straight line through the empty banquet hall. Instead, she hugged the wall and circled around towards the stairs. The four silver bells remained eerily silent. As she passed by one of the rooms, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching from very close to the door. Lumian, in a prime position, even caught a glimpse of a male servant in a red shirt and white pants, about to collide head-on with Leah. She had no cover in sight. Leah didn't panic. She turned around, placed her hand on the wall, and scaled the oil painting hanging 2 meters above the ground. Then, she stood on her tiptoes and stepped onto the frame. She stood firmly with her back against the wall without letting the oil painting drop. Lumian wanted to applaud because it reminded him of an acrobatic performance he had seen in Darige last year at a circus. The male servant left the room and instinctively looked around before walking towards the kitchen. Just as he took a few steps forward, Leah slid soundlessly to the ground against the oil painting. Then, she rolled twice and hid behind a pillar. After the male servant disappeared from the banquet hall, she leaned against the wall again. Finally, she arrived at the staircase and confirmed that everything was clear. Upon seeing this, Lumian darted out of the stone platform and ran over in a straight line. He was so fast that he reached Leah in less than 3 seconds. However, he wasn't the fastest. Ryan completed the journey in just the time it took to take one breath. Valentine wasn't slow either. His physique was clearly stronger than ordinary people. Without another word, Leah took the lead and the four of them hurriedly entered the stairs, arriving at the second floor of the residence. There were closed rooms on both sides of the corridor, with 2 rooms having light shine in through the windows at the end of the corridor. The overall environment was abnormally dark. Ryan suggested, surveying their surroundings. "Let us split up and search different rooms. This will save time and make it easier to hide. However, we must remain no more than 1 room apart from each other, in case something happens and we cannot save each other in time." Leah and the others nodded in agreement. Lumian promptly approached the nearest room, pressing his ear to the door to listen for any movement inside. After a moment, he deftly turned the handle and slipped inside. The room belonged to a maid. He searched for a while, but found no clues. He moved on to the next room. In this way, the four of them carefully avoided the servants and explored most of the second floor. Towards the end of their search, Lumian arrived at the door of the room that had traumatized him, Louis Lund's bedroom. According to the historical sequence of events, this butler should have given birth yesterday. His stomach had been torn open and, even with sutures, he would not recover quickly. He must be recuperating in bed. Lumian thought to himself, contemplating whether to push the door open and have a chat with Louis Lund. As someone who had personally experienced bizarre phenomena, this male butler undoubtedly knew a great deal. However, this would contradict their principle of observation and exploration. Lumian couldn't guarantee that Louis Lund wouldn't reveal his presence to Madame Pualis. The fact that he had given birth to the other party's child meant there were no secrets between them. Silencing him would only confirm Madame Pualis's suspicions. What a pity. If only I knew something about hypnosis. Lumian sighed inwardly. He habitually pressed his ear to the door, listening for any sound. Nothing. As a hunter, Lumien's hearing was acute enough to detect breathing from 2 to 3 meters away even with a barrier in between. No one. Louis Lund has just given birth. Where can he go? Lumien turned the doorknob and slowly pushed the door open, peering inside. The room was clean and free of the bloodstains he had seen before. Louis Lund was nowhere to be found. Lumien furrowed his brow and stepped inside. The signs of a recent human presence were evident: a blanket rumpled on the bed, a cigarette butt on the nightstand, a black coat hung on the chair, and faint footprints on the floor. In addition, there were blood stains on the edge of the bed that had not been cleaned. Apart from this, Lumien also saw some blood stains that hadn't been wiped off from the edge of the bed. Lumien nodded to himself. He had indeed given birth here yesterday. Suddenly, faint voices outside the window caught his attention. He hurried to the glass window, turned his body, and peered out. In the stables, Louis Lund, black-haired, blue-eyed, and dressed in a white shirt, black suit, dark pants, and leather shoes, conversed with the carriage driver, Sewell, who had sent the siblings to Permitha. Lumien was taken aback by Louis Lund's healthy and steady appearance. Is this the person who had just given birth yesterday? And it was a C-section. Lumien suppressed the shock in his heart and listened carefully to what Louis Lund and Sewell were saying. Unexpectedly, these two fellows were only exchanging experiences in gardening. What's the matter? With Lumien inside the room for so long, Ryan, donning a dark bowler hat, pushed open the door and entered the room followed by Leah and Valentine. Lumien quickly filled them in on Louis Lund's situation. Ryan pondered for a moment before asking, "Have you heard of Earth Mother?" The Darij region had a border with the Fainapotter kingdom. Shepherds often went there. Coupled with his sister's basic education, Lumien was no stranger to this. Yes, the deity that Fainapotter believes in. Ryan nodded and said, Earth Mother is associated with fertility, healing, and life. These domains are reflected in the beyonder powers of the corresponding pathway. While I'm not saying that Louis Lund's situation is related to the Earth Mother, it's possible that his ability to give birth and quick recovery are linked to these domains. Is that so? Lumien found this plausible after some thought. After all, men were already capable of giving birth. What was so strange about them being out and about after a C-section? Did you find anything? Lumien asked Ryan and the others. Ryan shook his head. They were all normal servants' quarters. We may have to check the third floor. Lumien felt a sense of unease wash over him. Madame Puali's and Administrator Beast's quarters comprised a bedroom, study, solarium, and activity room, all located on the third floor. This posed a significant risk. Very well, Ryan replied without hesitation. The four of them proceeded to sneak up to the third floor. Many of the doors were ajar, and the corridor was brightly lit. Lumien made a beeline for the bedroom, which was adorned with a light-colored velvet blanket on the bed, a small bookshelf stocked with bedtime reading materials, a capacious cloakroom brimming with a variety of clothes, a safe containing precious collections, a set of plush beige sofas, a table displaying 5 photo frames and documents, and a fluffy white carpet covering the entire room. Lumien and company surveyed the room and simultaneously headed towards the table. The books on the table were mostly popular novels, including Furzwall's masterpiece, The Adventure of Five, Vice Admiral Ailment, and Aurora's latest work, The Substitute Detective. The documents pertained mainly to various matters in the Darij area. As for the 5 photos displayed in the frames, 4 were of Madame Puali's, and 1 belonged to a man Lumien did not recognize. No photo of the administrator, he exclaimed, surprised. Madame Puali's was the sole subject of the 4 photos, each depicting her in different clothing and poses. The male photo was not of Administrator Beast, who, after all, was the male owner of the house. Wasn't this peculiar? Leah nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps the administrator's status in this family is akin to that of a butler. Have you ever seen a butler's photograph displayed in someone's home? Then who is this man? Lumien inquired, pointing to the photo frame on the side. The frame contained a color photograph of a man in his late 20s. He was wearing a red shirt, a black velvet coat, and dark pants with tassels. He sported a pair of short lace-up boots and was dressed very fashionably. He bore a striking resemblance to Madame Puali's, with light eyebrows, bright brown eyes, and brown hair parted in an exaggerated 7-3 style. His lips were curled up, giving him the air of a hooligan who frequented high society. All in all, this man's facial features were not extraordinary, but they were pleasing to the eye. Madame Pualisa's brother. Lumien hazarded a guess based on his appearance.